Yeah. So, yeah, that's it. That's good. I saw. So you want me to just read these two?
You're taking some.
It's easy if you just go.
Check.
Yeah, they're all different.
Yeah, but just gonna take some.
Really? I got it.
Yeah, I get the number.
Yeah, but like that's like
That's right.
Oh my God, that would have been so bad. This is my costume. Time being 7 o'clock, I call to order the October 25th Franklin School Committee meeting. Meetings are recorded by Franklin TV and shown on Comcast Channel 11 and Verizon Channel 29, as well as recorded by Franklin Matters. Any individual who also wishes to record this meeting must notify the chair in accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20F. At the conclusion of our meeting, we will be adjourning to executive session and will not be returning to open meeting. All right, first on the agenda are our pledge students. If I could have them come up to the microphone. Just have a little bit to say about each. So this evening we have Christian Matthey and Mia Sartini. They are both 8th grade students at Horace Mann Middle School. They have worked hard in their 3 years of middle school, and we are pleased to have them represent our school tonight. Chris has a passion for science and has received Horace Mann's End of Year Science Award from his teachers in both 6th and 7th grade. Chris was an athlete in our inaugural season of unified basketball at the Franklin Middle Schools and represented Horace Mann very well as a player on the blue team. Outside of school, Chris likes to do computer programming, spend time with his family, take fencing lessons, and he cares for his turtle Pancake. A goal for Chris in high school next year is to take classes that challenge his academic gifts in the areas of math and science. Mia has a passion for art and has been a member of Horace Mann's art club this year. Mia persevered through remote learning during her entire 6th grade year and has worked hard the last 2 years to transition back into the full middle school rigor and routine. Outside of school, Mia likes to make art, play the ukulele, ride her bike, visit the library, be a mother's helper, and spend time with family. A goal for Mia in high school is to explore academics and trades that support her passion for art and writing. It is with great pleasure that Mr. Healy and Ms. Mott recognize Chris and Mia tonight. Along with their teachers, we thank them for all the ways they have had a positive impact on the Horace Mann Middle School community. If you two wouldn't mind leading us in the pledge, if everyone could stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you both so much for being here with your families. Okay. Now, as is customary, we will pause for a moment of silence. Thank you, everyone. Next on agenda, routine business, review of agenda. Agenda look okay to everyone? Okay. Payment of bills, this is all set. Payroll, Ms. Stokes.
Those are in order.
Right, and next we have our FHS student representative comments. If you sit in, Han, would you like to take it away?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Ahan Shetty. I am the class president at Franklin High School for the junior class. To give some updates on what's going on with the juniors, we currently have our prom committee formed and we are meeting every other week. So we do have a meeting this Friday on the 28th. Our prom is currently set for May 5th, 2023 at the Lamberto's Hall in Randolph. And we're currently still working on finalizing our first fundraiser of the year, which will be used to fundraise for prom. For sports at Franklin High, this is currently the last week of the regular season. Playoffs are going to start in the next few weeks. All fall teams are doing exceptionally well and are top 10 for Division I sports. The football team had a very impressive 44-0 win against Attleboro on homecoming night. During the halftime show, for that, there were the parades where each of the classes decorated and drove around the track, which is really fun and nice to see. The Unified Basketball team has another upcoming home game on November 2nd at 6 o'clock in the gym. Last night, the volleyball team took a great 3-1 win against Attleboro, moving into a three-way tie for first place into the Kelly Rex with KP and Attleboro. There's only one game left to go for them. The boys soccer team clinched the Kelly Rex division with a win against Attleboro yesterday, so congrats to them. And the golf team has finished their season. They are currently co-champs of the Kelly Rex division with King Philip. Special congratulations to Tyler O'Brien, who finished third overall in the Hawk Mock tournament. And the girls soccer team is also performing phenomenal. They are 13-3, have a couple of big upcoming games this week. The field hockey team is 14-1. Cross country has their Hawk Mock championship meet this Saturday. And looking into the future, winter sports registration is now open on Family ID through November 18th. And winter sports are looking to start on November 28th. So that's all for sports. And Sid will let you know about the class of 2023.
Hey, everyone. I'm Sid, and I'm the class of 2024 vice president. So for the class of 2023, senior quotes for the yearbook are due October 31st. So that's coming up, and they will soon launch their first fundraiser of the year, which is a raffle calendar, which will be rolled out shortly. They'll be sold in November, and this is to fundraise for future events like Senior Week. And then many kids are applying to colleges with many early action and early deadlines next week. And it's a really stressful time for the kids. And, you know, it's all coming together for them in the next 4 years. And then moving to whole school news, student government planned a spectacular homecoming dance that was very successful with over 1,200 students attending. And all proceeds went to the Susan J. Komen Breast Cancer Charity. Franklin High School Theater is currently working on Cinderella, which will be performed on Friday, November 11th, Saturday, November 12th, Friday, November 18th, and Saturday, November 19th, which is certainly something I'll be going to. Ski club signups are open to all kids, and it's a first come, first served basis. There'll be trips to Wachusett every Tuesday, and school starting around December or January. Parent-teacher conferences will be on November 9th and November 10th. On November 9th, it'll be in person, and November 10th, it'll be virtual only. And more info on how parents can sign up for those will come out next week. The FHS Academic Learning Center in room 242 is open on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays from 2:15 to 3:45 for anyone looking for help for their homework. Looking into the future a little bit, SATs will be held at FHS on November 5th with some juniors taking it and a lot of seniors also taking it. AP exam payments are due November 1st, and club activity fees are due November 15th, and the quarter first quarter ends for us November 10th.
Camille, anything? That's it for Cinderella. Sorry. What kind of fundraisers do you think that you'll do for the prom?
Right now we're leaning towards a restaurant, most likely because we've done them in the past. They do tend to have a great show out. We're still looking to which one we might want to do in the town, but that should be finalized soon.
Awesome. I can't wait to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much for coming.
No problem.
Have a great night.
You too.
Mr. Jagir.
Great. Good evening,
Superintendent's
everyone.
report.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, boys. All right. So first, I just want to start off by wishing our families who celebrate Diwali a festive holiday and a safe holiday. Just to educate our community, Diwali is known as the Festival of Lights. It's recognized in India as their biggest holiday, and it takes course over the course of 5 days. And during this time, when it occurs in autumn, typically in October, it can be summed up as a time of remembrance and embracing good over evil and knowledge over ignorance. So wanted to just give a shout out to our families that celebrate that. Moving forward with some updates. On 10/28, we had a professional development day. The elementary focused on some math training and also continued the work of our literacy audit and the survey that's taking place. At the middle level, our middle and high school, our 6 through 12 grade educators continued the new teacher keys to literacy training that occurs for all of our educators in those subject areas. Other teachers participated in some content specific curriculum collaboration at levels. And at the high school, I know that the civics projects and collaboration occurred as well to look for ways to incorporate civic engagement into the curriculum. My next update is related to student behavior. I want to give just an update to the school committee, the town, the folks listening online, and I'll also put this out in writing to families who maybe aren't tuning in so they can read, just to share an update and kind of where we're at as a district. I am listing some support of our families. One thing we've talked about is engaging our community, engaging our families as partners, and a conversation that we have often is let's give parents and guardians a chance to parent and guardian and try to work with us on a couple of areas. So we've seen an uptick in student behavior this year, and it's typically occurring in some of our less structured areas. So you'll see behavior occurring on a bus ride home when the bus driver's driving. You'll see in transitions in hallways, in cafeterias, and in bathrooms, some of those areas where they're just less supervised. So I'm really trying to enlist the support of the families, as I said, to help us send some reminders to kids and just reinforce positive behavior. And that's the ask. So here's the ask. You'll hear me say that a few times. I've been adding that just to be clear on what's being asked of folks is just to support this, support appropriate behavior, have conversations and remind your children about those spaces and reminding them just to be respectful and kind. And if they're having an issue, to let someone know so we can have our staff involved in helping to resolve any kind of conflicts that are occurring. As far as spectators, you heard a little bit about the dance. We had a very successful homecoming dance, so large crowd that had the high school. I want to give Principal Hannah, I think he is here, credit for setting expectation for what's expected if you go, and the students rose to the occasion and showed up, and by all accounts, it was a successful homecoming dance. It's not on accident. I think when we are clear about what we expect and we have families who support that and work with their kids when they send them off, and also we provided a lot of structure. We hired over 20 staff volunteers to help with the dance. We had 3 police officers, we had administration, central office administration, just to help maintain a safe environment. And that's what it takes for us to do what we need to do in order to work together. So that's an example of kind of a community coming together to create some success there. As far as spectating, as you heard from the students, we've had really outstanding play and performance once again from our athletes and our teams, and they're competing at high levels. And as a community, I know we share an expectation for our athletes and for our fans that we're going to demonstrate sportsmanship, integrity, and that's not only on the field, but we expect the same kind of behavior from our fans as well. I sent a reminder like this earlier in the year. I felt like it was responded to positively, but I think it's worth saying again as we continue through this season and continue on. I'll probably say it again. I don't think it hurts. So basically, I'm enlisting the support of our fan base, our students, our families, our community members who attend games, to just make sure that we're representing a welcoming environment. So the ask here is we put out fan expectations. So if you are a parent of a student who attends, just remind them about what's expected. I will link our 10 expectations and I'll reference a few here. So fan cheering is part of the game. It's celebrated. I think it adds to the positive environment. It actually can impact athletes when they hear people cheering for them. When it's done in good taste, it creates a positive environment. When inappropriate cheering occurs, or there's excessive jeering or taunts or offensive slurs that don't represent our school or our community values, that can have an adverse effect, as you can imagine. So what we don't want is to have those create a negative impression for the individual, for the school, for the town in many ways when those things happen. And I think we've heard, we have examples of that when that's demonstrated, and one individual can represent a whole community, unfortunately, when those things happen. So I'm asking folks to just remind their children and students and about positive participation in our events. One part I wanted to add was we've experienced an increase from the meet. I sent a letter in September about middle school attendance at our games and asking families to not drop off kids, but attend with an adult and have them supervised. We've seen an uptick in middle school students who appear to be unattended behind the bleachers particularly. So the area behind the bleachers at our varsity games will be off limits for folks. And we put a tremendous amount of planning and coordination in organizing these events. Our athletic director, our principal, our administration, we have ticket collectors, we have event supervisors, pep band, staff members, we have a police detail, and there's a tremendous amount of responsibility trying to manage the event, which is the game. And we want to focus our attention towards the game. But when we have to kind of monitor two fronts, behind the bleachers is not an area that we can afford to have folks have to expend a lot of time. And so what we are doing is, if you are a Franklin High student, you attend the football games as you would. If you are not a Franklin High student, or you're an elementary or middle school student, we ask that a parent accompany their child to the game and be with their child throughout the game, at that game, and not let students. I did notice I've been going to every home game. I mentioned this so that we don't run into a bigger problem, but I did notice last game it was more students than I was comfortable. I had to clear that field myself at one point because it was so packed with students, and it just doesn't feel like where we should be focusing our energy when we have a lot going on in other areas. So that's if students are found to be in attendance and they're not accompanied, we're going to call the families and ask them to come pick them up at that point. So my goal in communicating this is to avoid any kind of problems moving forward. There is, for example, we have many many teams participating in playoffs. I expect a high turnout. We have great fan support in this town, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with what that can look like and should look like, and just try to avoid any issues in that area. The other pieces I have in here are around just social media use. A reminder, we've put out, we did a critical conversation last year around social media use and the impact. There have been situations where I find that our admin across all levels are spending a significant amount of time investigating issues that occur throughout the week. We've even seen, some physical altercations as a result of something born online and occurred. And we're looking for help from our community and from our families as well. We certainly have a job to do as a school in investigating and creating a safe environment during school. But it's hard when online behavior can occur outside of the school hours, but make its way back in. So we're looking for folks to just work with their children on reminding them around what they text, what they say, their online behavior. If they're in a situation where they're experiencing some difficulty, let an adult know, let their parents know, communicate with the school if they have a trusted adult so we can try to help intervene before things escalate. That would be a real help, because I think we do spend a lot of time, but with the hours we have them during the school day, I think this has to be a joint effort for us to move this work forward. Finally, the final point I wanted to make was around communication in general. As we have navigated the school year, certainly I recognize as a parent when there's ever a concern related to your child, it can be heightening. It can certainly create concern and anxiety and frustration. All those feelings can come out. And this is a plea that unfortunately, when those things escalate and communication becomes escalated, I found that our admin and some of our staff have been on the receiving end of some pretty aggressive, angry emails, voicemails, and conversations that I don't know lead to us being able to leave those conversations or read those emails and leave in a place where we resolve the issue. I think it leads to more frustration in some ways. So it's not to take away from someone who may be frustrated with what they are experiencing, but the approach to that, certainly I want to put a plea out to our families around when you experience that, to try to come from a place of resolving the problem, communicating it. And I know that our admin team and our teachers and staff are all interested to partner and work with families to resolve problems. I don't think it serves us to be at odds with any family. So those were the big updates that I wanted to provide and just set the stage for kind of some of the expectations I will put in the letter to share with families that I hope will be helpful. The final piece I have is around November 8th is a professional development day that we have. And it's our full professional development day. And in the morning, the teachers will work in grade-specific professional development. The teachers will focus on reading instruction. And at the secondary level, there will be some building-based PD on content-specific areas. What we're excited about is, you may remember last year when we had our professional development day in November, we did an afternoon where colleagues came together, and we have this year over 70 educators are going to be offering sessions for their colleagues to learn and develop practices and present ideas and strategies and facilitate roundtable discussions and collaborate and design and create curriculum. So these teachers will be able to attend 3 sessions throughout the afternoon. We're really excited. I want to thank Dr. Rogers and Dr. Frazier for their leadership in the PD world and coordinating that with our digital learning integrationists to put that system together. And we're excited about that day. So,
Thank you. I'll just go down the line. Camille?
My only question was about the PD, which I'm really excited about. In my district, we do that, and it's so fun to attend sessions that are designed by your colleagues and hosted by your colleagues. When they've been less successful, it's because it's some company that comes in and they run a session and they're trying to sell you the product. So I just wanted to ask what percentage is companies like that?
So I believe if the number is 70, I think we have about 90 sessions. There are six 50-minute sessions that are led by vendors. Those vendors are products that we already have in-house that are offering a little bit more of an extension to learning that's already taken place. So
that makes me very happy. Yeah, it hasn't happened often, but I've sat in a session and felt like I am stuck at one of those timeshares right now.
What I will say with those sessions is that they are either co-facilitated. Well, they are all going to be co-facilitated by
staff member.
By staff member. Yep.
Yay.
Awesome. That's my only question.
Dave?
Thank you very much. I just have 2 questions, comments, actually about something I was just reading in the news leading up to this. And so one of them, there was a story about the ESSER fundings. And I know I've said this before, I was really kind of commend central office. This article was talking about those districts that, might not have spent all of the ESSER funding, by the time that, September 30th next year kind of rolls around. Miriam, I always appreciate every time that I ask, probably like a dozen times now, that we're definitely spending all the ESSER funds well in advance. Never mind, continuing to repeat the exact same answer. But as we kind of start to look forward with some of the ESSER fundings, I know there was a lot of new programs and initiatives that we were able to kickstart with the ESSER funding, with the intent to kind of roll into the operating budget in the future. And one thing just that kind of popped into my head as I was reading this, one maybe ask or recommendation would be for any of these initiatives that were funded, solely with ESSER, that's going to be kind of changing in the future, that we have a lot of kind of concrete examples to be able to show, what this bought us. Because I know that for me, I feel like the budget season, I still had Christmas lights hanging up and I was getting the budget book, it came fast. And so I would love to be able to have well in advance, a lot of really good, examples of, what this is and how, why it was so valuable and why we want to roll that into the operating budget, just earlier than later, if I could.
Sure.
And something else too, I was reading the Mass State Auditor just last week released an audit talking about within the Commonwealth, they estimated there'd be about $1.2 billion in unfunded mandates. And they really did an in-depth kind of look into all the different, unfunded mandates are out there, how much it's costing all the municipalities. And so I know that, one thing is, we can, kind of move forward and request a mandate determination. We can also kind of just reach out to our legislators to say here's the audit, here's some of the numbers. But I didn't know if that's something as a committee that we wanted to kind of work on to kind of draft something together. I don't know if that's just something that, Miriam, we might be able to kind of have a conversation about to talk about, what are some of these unfunded mandates that are being brought up in this audit that we might be able to address and to reach out to either get, especially with a surplus kind of coming, some funding for that, or, the alternative is the ability to kind of not have to follow that unfunded mandate. But I didn't know if that would be something that we would all kind of work together on or have a subcommittee, or just kind of just communications you and I might be able to have. And maybe that's a question for Madam Chairwoman or anybody at large. Sorry,
So of course I will tell you, if you want to have that discussion, I'm happy to have that in this type of a setting or in a private setting, if that's what you're more comfortable with. I have, the last time I updated our unfunded mandate listing, which was really just an excerpt of unfunded mandates, because there are a lot of them and many of them are very difficult to quantify. So the last time I did look at that in depth was in 2020, in November of 2020, in fact. So I can update that. I know that the FinCom put out a request to perhaps talk about unfunded mandates as well. Unfunded mandates, my opinion, they level the playing field in terms of every district has to comply, I guess I will say, with unfunded mandates. So they might cost more in different districts because of the population or the demographics in that district, but every district is complying with them. And certainly we can have that discussion at whatever level you'd like to partake. And if there are particular ones you'd like me to look into, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I had kind of pulled a few of them, so maybe I'll kind of flip them your way. So it just kind of came up. It's something that, I think that right now with that article right on its heels, the iron's hot. So it might be a great opportunity, even, if there are any funds that we might be able to kind of push our way into our district, I think would be helpful. So, all right, wonderful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yes.
So Mr. Gear, you'd mentioned the uptick in student behavior in the lesser structured areas. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that in terms of what are we seeing happening and which groups or which areas, grade levels that we seeing this happen more in?
Sure. So we're definitely seeing just lunch behaviors when students are going to get lunch, pushing, shoving, those types of things at the middle level. And I would say the high school as well, when they're going in to get food in that serving area would be one area. I think another part I've had is really the comments and things being made. I think we live in a culture where some of the, students who are kind of navigating a hallway and trying to get from A to B, we've received reports. Typically when we investigate something, it's from something that was said, and it's typically in a hallway or in an area where they're leaving school and whatnot. So my plea was just around trying to coach kids up on like I don't know if I'm dating myself, but like if you don't have anything positive, say don't say it kind of thing. That would be my ask. And that's what I'm going to reinforce with my own. The bus has become an area. We've had some physical altercations on buses, and we've had some problems that have come out of the bus where words have been exchanged in a few of our bus settings at the middle and high school level. And cafeteria, bus, hallways, and bathrooms. One thing that we're paying attention to, we've seen an increase in we have vape detectors. We applied for a grant a few years ago and we received it. They were installed. We have vaping happening in our high school bathrooms that I can speak to today that have required us to really look to rededicate and repurpose some of our resources to help us monitor those areas. But that's an area. And you know what, with vaping, the health of a student is like the first priority. We've provided a few options and opportunities for engagement with our students through the Mass Partnership for Youth and our families. And we take that seriously. But ultimately, where the vapes are coming, we're not issuing, I'm not saying that sarcastically. I mean to say the vapes are coming into school somehow. So we're looking for ways. We've offered Hidden in Plain Sight, which is through the Substance Abuse Task Force and the SAFE Coalition with Jen Knight, and have provided that at a few of our open houses. I think that would be something we want to continue to bring back, because you'd be surprised what a vape can look like in many ways. And I'm going to be sharing that in my letter as well with some detail about what to look for. But it was an ask to families, like if we can prevent and try to look for ways to work together to stop those types of things from coming in. We have an obligation during the school hours, but we're trying to just work together and expand our communication and enlist some support. And I don't want to paint a rosy picture that everything's perfect, because we have areas that we're working on and we are trying really hard, and it feels most appropriate that we try to work together and help us reinforce some of those behaviors. So
thank you. That's been very informative. I appreciate your approach to include the families and really hit it on both fronts. I think we'll get more traction that way. Has there been any thought to maybe leverage advisory to bring some of this in as well down the road if we see this continuing to happen?
Yes. So one, I should mention, it also occurs during a health education curriculum. I can get you the information on that. But yes, the idea is right now in advisory, they've worked through kind of the team building and working together. Each grade level will continue to have a different focus, but these are the things that we need to be hitting with our students and engaging our kids in. So the answer is yes to that. And like I said, it's not a matter of shifting responsibility. It's more expanding responsibility.
Great. Thank you.
And it's no judgment. I get it. And we're just trying to create a healthy environment where kids can enter and be successful and belong. And we'll talk more about that later.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for this update, and certainly, disheartening to hear about the uptick in student behaviors. But we've been talking a lot these past 2 weeks in the district improvement plans in regards to multi-tier levels of support, as well as the new data tracking implementation that we're going to be to help create plans, support plans and assistance over the course of students' careers. And hopefully, we certainly hope that over this next year we see good progress in regards to the implementation of those and addressing that. So hopefully we'll be very proactive on that. I appreciate you sharing information the past couple of weeks. So we look forward to seeing how those bear out and how we can continue to improve upon those to reduce the number of student behaviors that we're seeing and make for a more positive and healthy and safe learning environment for students, teachers, and all this stuff.
Thank you.
Elise?
I'm going to continue with the behavior theme. Even though I was excited about the PD answer too, that sounds great. And just to clarify, this Friday is a half day, and then the 8th
yes,
is a full
half day
day
on the 28th.
Yeah,
it's a full day on November 8th.
Yeah,
and it's voting day.
Yeah,
election day.
That's true. So I think it's great to be working with families to support the respectful behavior in school. Kids need to know that they can come to school and feel safe and feel ready to learn and not feel like they're being paranoid about somebody in the hallway after class or something like that. So to take that off the table so they can just focus on chemistry or social studies or whatever it is.
it made me remember the amazing critical conversations that the Substance Abuse Task Force put on last spring, I think it was, on social media.
Yeah.
Was that last spring? And I think that's a really good resource for people who didn't see it or people who saw it. And sometimes watching those types of things more than once, you hear something different every time. And so I was reminding myself that it would be good to find that. Where can that be found?
That should be posted. We've switched roles when I moved. So I had like an assistant superintendent tab. I think we reshuffled a few things. So what I can do is in my write-up for tonight is basically the draft of the letter I'll send. I'll link it so it's easy for everybody just to see if they're interested to look and see that. And
I think that'd be so helpful.
I wanted to just say, when I mentioned earlier, we have a kind of a context of students who might make comments to one another. I'm reminded of the messaging and the modeling our students receive on a daily basis when you look at a feed or YouTube shorts or, any type of post out there. You can get messages that are sent to you that model sarcasm or model just comments and things like that. And I don't think it's exclusive to any group or student. I just think it's like the nature. So when we're trying to address those things in school, there's a larger context as well that I'm aware of. And, I get that I receive messaging when I look at my phone that can, lead to. So that's kind of the context that I want to make sure we're clear on. I'm not sure our students without education and reminders from school and from families, not sure what each kid would consider to be offensive. Or I don't want to assume that every kid making a comment is really understanding the gravity of it either. So I think that's our charge as educators and families. And I think that's what we have to kind of work together towards. So thank you for asking that question.
Right. And I think there is like a contextual thing. Like I tell my 7th grade all the time, a joke you would tell to your friend, you don't tell it when your mother's around, or you don't tell it when your sister's in the car. It's not appropriate. It's like, but my friend thinks it's funny. Yeah, but I don't. Right. Neither does she. It's not appropriate. So it's like they have to learn those different contexts, and that can be there can be growing pains there. Right. So it sounds like, as far as just continuing along the lines of behavior, it sounds like there are a lot of resources being spent on behavior, not just preventing behavior or managing behavior in the moment, but then sort of the follow-up if behavior sort of necessitate some type of investigation process. And it's a lot of work to run a school. And these administrators, like, this isn't their only role. This isn't their only responsibility. It's just to manage behaviors and sort of set this up and think it through and state the expectations. They've got a whole lot of other things, lots of balls in the air, lots of things on their plate. And it's, it's necessary and it's critical and it's urgent. But I think I get sort of nervous about are we spreading, that's a lot of work. And are we spreading admin too thin? And then where's it going to give? And I think my, understanding the philosophy and implementation of social emotional learning in schools is after a couple years of all the kids getting instruction about how to get along and how to, be nice to each other and respect differences and disagree respectfully and all those sort of the practice throughout the years, like these things hopefully will be less and less often, but that doesn't help today, right? So I'm glad to hear the homecoming dance went well, but it sounds like there was a lot of manpower there, or a lot of adults there to ensure that. And I think, commending administration to understand, we need to be proactive. We need to set everybody up for success and be very clear about the expectations. But that, again, takes a lot of resources and time and energy. And thank you to administration and all the chaperones who were there that night, and our police department for helping to support. But also, I guess just echoing your plea for families to model and talk to their kids about being respectful to each other.
Thank you. It definitely, behavior when there is an uptick can tax the system and pull administrators that we want to be focused on those goals and the areas that we presented. It certainly can, but we recognize too, this is not a shift in or a blame situation. I'm really saying this, and I mean this with all sincerity. It's a group effort, a community effort if we're going to help. And I'm just looking for people to pull the people they love the most, which are their children, in and just have some conversations and reminders around how can we help this and work together. So thank you for pointing that out.
Right, because it's the whole culture, the whole community of the school. If it was just one or two kids, you just talk to one or two kids. You wouldn't be talking here for all the families. And so I think that's the thing, like building the culture in the community and really reinforcing that we respect each other and we don't have to agree on things, but we can get along. It's important. So thanks.
Thank you.
Megan?
Yeah, thank you, Lucas, for the presentation. And I think, engaging our parents, kids' parents on this as a, community help sounds like a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so moving right along from superintendent's report, we have guest presentation. Mr. Jakir, if you wouldn't mind setting up the
Sure.
podium for
So
our
we
presentation and plan.
I'll transition over to the table.
Please do.
With Mrs. Morano, our Assistant Superintendent of Student Learning, Ms. Heidi Harris, our Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and also Mrs. Dr. Rogers are going to ask to stay and set up the system. So tonight, in the series of plans that we are rolling out, we've talked a little bit about our district improvement plan. We've talked about our school improvement plan. And now we're at the stage where each of our schools has presented, and we're here for the diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I will kick it off and just provide some context. I know that we're going to pull up a presentation. Thank you. Is this the? Yeah. Okay, great. I'll just reach over. It's no problem. Nope, that's okay. I'll just do this. So you may recall we have our and actually I introduced everybody quickly, but I don't think we've had Heidi here to actually talk and introduce. I'll let you just introduce yourself and then we can kick off. So I felt bad if I'm speaking for you.
No worries. Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be here and to report out on our equity audit and just give you an update on just kind of where we're going with the work. So far, I have enjoyed my time in Franklin. Everyone has been very, very supportive. And you have amazing students here. So.
Thank you. So, say again? Oh, good. So, and I will introduce Amanda, who should be on right now. Sakari Preston.
I see your face.
I see her
There she
face.
is.
Hello, Amanda. Amanda works for the Public Consulting Group, who did the equity audit. So Amanda, hello. From the chambers. Thank you for being here. So just to set the context for the presentation, you'll see we have on the screen our district initiatives. So we've reviewed these with you. These were the main areas, but if you look at number 5, it really focused on developing an equity action plan. I know the questions came up throughout the presentations where we talked about that. So to just set the context for tonight, look at this in 3 phases. The first phase is for us to provide context on DEI and what does that actually mean and what does that mean to Franklin. The second part will be to allow Amanda to jump on and talk a little bit about the equity audit and the process that we undertook in the spring. And then at the end, we'll talk more about our outcomes and our actions. Okay. So as far as our timeline, we have in the spring, we conducted the audit. Over the summer and the fall, the district consulted with PCG to look at the audit results and kind of work through some of those findings. And also at that same time, as we were onboarding our new DEI director, we saw an opportunity to continue that transition and provide some coaching support from PCG and allow us to roll into the fall. We had a finalized report and presentation, and here we are tonight meeting with you. We consider this, you can't hear me well? Okay.
I think it
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. So as we worked with Mirko Chardon, the keynote we had, who works in this area, you may remember from the first day of school, he talks about year 0, and that's when you get information. How do you build off of it and grow and develop a plan? And we'll talk more about that in detail tonight. I'm going to provide a community engagement opportunity on November 19th for families who want to continue this conversation from the presentation. And obviously the Equity Action Plan is part of the development that we'll look to achieve by the end of the year. Okay. Correct? Yes. All right. So diversity, equity, inclusion. Sometimes we get asked, what is DEI? The DEI committee created this. And right now there's a lot of words up there, but I would just point to make some meaning of it. Diversity is really what we consider in Franklin Public Schools is the reflection of people's unique differences, right? Individual identity, their thoughts, ideas, perspectives, and values. When we think about equity, we think about making sure that every student who walks through our doors has an opportunity, has the resources and support that they need to access their education and to ultimately attain the skills of a portrait of a grad. And finally, with inclusion, it's around trying to create a community where we value and respect each other's input, particularly decisions that may impact their lives. What that really means to me, I've talked about this before, but the why in this work, and I think about, I've used this reference before, but it's important to me and it kind of resonates, is when I wake up in the morning, I told you, sometimes I'm advantaged by being able to drive and drop my kids off at school. And I pulled up to that school drop-off line and I'll let my kids out of my truck and watch them walk in. And then I watch them walk in with a lot of different kids. Some kids are getting off a van. Some are getting off a big yellow bus. Some are walking. Some are riding a bike. And in all those cases, they're coming from all walks of life, all with different experiences, right? Some are carrying trauma and entering our buildings. Some are advantaged in different ways, maybe socioeconomically. Some may be disadvantaged. Some may come in good health and in a good situation. And at the end of the day, they will all get educated, and our goal is to make sure everyone comes into our building and gets the education they deserve. So when I think about that and I have that visual of them walking through those doors, every single kid who converges on our schools, we have a responsibility to educate. And I think a lot about the only requirement is that they rest their head in Franklin, which is something I take seriously too. But ultimately that's what's required. And in the matter of a week's time, I think I might have mentioned this in my interview, I can remember sitting with a family that had just moved here who was relocating from another country and meeting with them to talk about what would be in place, how would we support them. And then literally like an hour later, I was with a fifth generation Franklin family who had different needs and supports. And in both cases, I had met with two different teams completely not connected. And the mission was to just make sure that we're doing everything we can to support kids and provide that education they deserve. So if I was to try to root my why and what I mean by this work, it's really focused on belonging and just making sure people feel like they belong.
And here is the portrait of a graduate. I'm just going to read it because I don't want to leave anything out, but Franklin has really strong elements that make up the portrait of a graduate. And we believe if we anchor these elements within an equity lens, so we turn it into an if-then statement, then students will express pride, confidence, and healthy self-esteem without denying the value and dignity of other people. Our next slide, for those that are a little more visual, we have this image from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and our friends on the top side of the slide, three of them are struggling a little bit. They all have the same materials, but they're struggling. And the bottom of the slide, everybody has what they need. They adapted the resources so that everybody is getting to the finish line. And then the equity statement that was created by the DEI committee last year. I think it's a beautiful equity statement. It's one that's a living statement. So as the committee continues to work, it may evolve. But if you look at number one, it speaks to affirming diversity, not tolerating, but affirming diversity. Number two talks about promoting equity by disrupting barriers to success for all students. And three speaks of that sense of belonging and having kids feel connected to their school communities. And that includes the hallways, the cafeterias, the bus, in addition to the classroom.
It's a quote from the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents and a framework they put out related to this work, and it resonated, and we thought we would add it here. So I will read it because it's how we can really capture the quote. But belonging, what we mean and what resonated was belonging is the ongoing culture created to have all people feel welcome. Cultivating belonging deepens how we understand and support each other. And it's manifested in the relationships, conversations, physical space, and written words. So what resonates is that last sentence for me is around, when we talk about that word belonging, it can have a lot of different meanings to people. But what we're really trying to get at is like the interactions, the things that we see, the conversations that take place throughout a school day, throughout any part of our life is really about, that's how you create belonging. It's not an action plan with all the steps. Right? The plan should be about how we help people create relationships and engage in conversations that are welcoming and really navigate the space around them and make sure that our practices and policies are all in line with that too when we think about written words. So. Neither why. These are some pictures of our students in our buildings that we really, our commitment, when we think about this work, and it can be tough, and I know that, and we have a blue screen, so that can be hard to present when it's blue. No, on a serious note, when we think about why we do the work, and I know that there are clearly this topic alone can bring out different feelings and different perspectives on this. But ultimately, what I wanted to share is that we're really interested when I look at the kids that we have in our buildings. This is why we do this work. This is why we're here. And we're really trying to create those environments and want people to feel welcomed and respected in each of those areas. So. Okay. All right. So, we'll pause there for a minute. That was kind of phase one, kind of setting the groundwork and the stage. And when we think about the next stage, it's the second part. It's really having our consultant from the public consulting group really talk to us a little bit about the audit and how that was done. And I'm going to kick it over to Amanda. At this point, she's the senior consultant for PCG.
Great. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Amanda Preston-Sakari. I am a senior consultant here with Public Consulting Group on our education strategies team, and I co-lead our team's equity work across the country, across New England, and I have had the pleasure of getting to know you all in Franklin over the last 6 months or so, working closely with superintendent and the leadership team through a few transitions and new additions, and it has been really great working with you all. So I am going to share an overview of our equity audit. Is it possible to get the screen sharing ability on our end?
And the host, co-host.
What I'd like to do a very long and thorough full report in presentation form that has been shared with the superintendent and the superintendent's team. This is a much abbreviated version of that, really just wanting to share how we went about the equity audit over the course of the last few months, the kind of things we looked at and for, and then a couple of our key priority recommendations and findings there that we have been working with the leadership team in the district over the summer and the beginning of the fall to start already doing a lot of really great work to get set up for success in year 0 and beyond. I can share now. Perfect. All right. So starting off with just the framework of the equity audit to just share how we went about this process over the last few months. So starting with our commitment to educational equity and what that means to us as we're coming into this work. Heidi, I think, shared that wonderful graphic of the bicycles and this idea that everyone is getting what they need in order to succeed, with a particular focus on students and communities that are historically marginalized or treated with low expectations due to race, cultural and linguistic diversity, disability, gender identity, and any number of different categories. But really keeping in mind that we're trying to make sure that we're looking at ways that the district can meet the need of every single student in Franklin. So the way that we frame our equity work is through these 6 buckets of equity and inclusion. So climate and culture, human resources, student outcomes, curriculum and professional learning, policy and practices, and resource allocation. So really digging into these 6 areas to answer that overarching question of how do the policies, practices, and processes in Franklin Public Schools promote educational equity, and where are there opportunities for improvement? So some of the methodology that we used when working with you all in Franklin, we started off with a data and document review. We requested a lot of information from the district. We used a lot of publicly available information from DESE, things like MCAS and other data that's available. But then within each of our buckets and our focus areas, looked at things like policies, manuals, reports, surveys, intervention information, professional development, and training. And so this is really a sample of some of the sources that we looked at in order to get at that overarching question of how Franklin is serving each student in the district from an equity lens. And so this is just an example of some of those things that we reviewed. We also were able to spend some time in Franklin, which was great. Loved meeting a lot of the community members, especially the students. Speaking with students is always our favorite part of this work. We held individual interviews with leaders across the district, school committee members, and then we conducted 10 community focus groups and encouraged feedback via email, and ended up receiving almost a dozen really great, thoughtful contributions via email as well. So we always try really hard to make sure that we are trying to capture as broad a swath of voices from across the community as possible in formulating our findings and recommendations in these audits. So one of the things that was unique about our work with Franklin is that you all already had a plan to have a plan coming into this audit. And so we knew ahead of time that you were hoping to take this equity audit results and really deepen and develop this equity action plan for the district. And so you were already a few steps ahead by the time we started this work. And so what we've been able to do with the superintendent's leadership team over the last few months and working directly with Heidi and others is really think about what that equity action plan could look like and include. And the idea is that the team, the equity task force, the DEI committee, that's working on building this action plan out, would take the full equity audit report, all of the recommendations and findings within that, dig into it, and work to kind of prioritize and organize those actions and plans into this framework that the district has already been developing. So thinking about things like being really explicit about the plan and where you're hoping to go. As Heidi shared earlier, that clear vision and common language for equity across the district is really important. And there's already a great start to that with the vision statement that was shared earlier. Those communication plans, how we're going to talk about equity and this plan and the progress made moving forward. One key piece here, of course, is that while the director of DEI, while Heidi should absolutely be leading this effort, this should be seen as the work of everyone in the community, because equity needs to really undergird all of the work of educating in Franklin and in any district. And then, of course, publicly tracking progress towards the goals of the district so that there are regular updates and the community is aware of what's going on and the work still to come. So what I'm going to share next are two top priority recommendations. As I'll speak to in a little bit, there are a lot more recommendations and findings in the full equity audit, but wanted to really prioritize these two elements, which based on our findings in this equity audit, we recommended these as kind of the first two to implement immediately and focus on in developing that year zero of the equity action plan. And I know that the leadership team is going to speak to some of the great work that's already been done in these areas as well, which is really exciting. So those two pieces are a district-wide discipline matrix and then what we're calling awareness campaigns. One thing I want to lay out before I dig into some of these two recommendations is what we're calling the rules for engagement. We assured everyone that we spoke to that not only would we respect and keep folks' confidentiality, but this idea of this equity audit is to enact impactful change for each and every stakeholder. That equity and perceptions and experiences of equity are rooted in each individual's experience. No matter the number of perspectives heard, each perspective is important and included. And as a reminder, just that the foundation of equity is providing voice to non-dominant groups. So knowing that in a community the size of Franklin, which may not be the biggest, in terms of sheer numbers of different subgroups of students and community members, that we took very seriously each individual experience and perception, and that is reflected in our full report, as well as what we ask that y'all keep in mind when looking through our findings there. So priority number one is the district-wide discipline matrix. What that means is really establishing clear and consistent consequences for bullying and microaggressions. That could include removal of extracurricular privileges in a consistent way, including athletics and access to athletics. This includes training on identifying incidents to respond to, explicit expectations and accountability for consistency of implementation, and implementing a log, a place where these complaints, infractions can be tracked and reviewed by administration. And the idea here is really what's highlighted in blue here, clear and consistent across the district. In alignment with that matrix would be a discipline team that would be formed to review these discipline infractions on a regular basis from an equity lens. Now, to be clear, this is supplementing, this is not replacing the existing prescribed mandated appeals process. It is just to ensure that anything happening around discipline implementation is happening through that equity lens as we look at some of that data. Now, with each of these two priority recommendations, I'm going to share some of the findings from the report that align with these recommendations. And so for the discipline matrix, some of the related findings, these are experiences and perceptions that were shared with us in interviews, in focus groups, in emails, and helped form our recommendations for the district. So the two main ones were a lack of clear responses to in-school harassment and bullying. So perceptions of unfair or inequitable discipline practices, the lack of consistency, and staff feeling unaware of actions to take in response to hearing certain things, certain slurs or behavior. And staff expressed a desire to learn more about that and how to address those. And we heard a lot this perception of preferential treatment of athletes and or popular students or students perceived as popular by other students. There's a belief that athletes do not face repercussions for bullying and discriminatory actions. Similarly, those students who were seen as being popular, which is often overlapped with those who were athletes. And so this unfair and inequitable practices, particularly for student athletes or students seen as popular, was a big piece and a theme that we heard in a lot of these conversations with stakeholders. And I wanted to also share some quantitative data that relates to the recommendation of the consistent district-wide discipline matrix. Risk ratio analysis is a really powerful tool, especially in districts where the sheer numbers of students and student groups may be smaller. What a risk ratio allows us to do is see, compared to any other student in the district, what does a student of a certain subgroup, what is their likelihood to receive a disciplinary infraction compared to anyone else in the district? If there are student subgroups with fewer than 10 students, they were not included in this analysis for the interest of protecting student privacy. And I won't go too deep into each of these, but just wanted to share some as examples of some of the findings that backed up that priority recommendation of the district-wide discipline matrix. By race and ethnicity, we could see that Hispanic or Latinx students are 2.9 times as likely to have been disciplined, to have received a discipline infraction than all other students in the district. Male students are 1.7 times as likely to have received a disciplinary infraction than all other students in the district. Students with IEPs are 1.8 times as likely to have received a disciplinary infraction than all other students. And economically disadvantaged students are 2.2 times as likely to have been disciplined or received a disciplinary infraction than all other students in the district. And what I do also want to emphasize is that Franklin is not unique in these risk ratios. And this is something that school districts struggle with across the country. But these are all data points that we wanted to include to show that tie into that priority recommendation of ensuring a consistent, equity-focused matrix for discipline across the district to hopefully move the needle on some of these disproportionalities. Our second priority recommendation, we're calling awareness campaigns. These are really marketing and communication and messaging campaigns in response to several topics that stakeholders were unaware of, felt were underserved, or had a perceived lack of transparency in the conversations that we had across the district. Things like, what is equity? Why should we focus on equity? Why should I care about equity? It really explains and celebrates the hiring of Heidi as the DEI director and highlights and explains the vision of educational equity in the district. Celebrating diversity at Franklin Public Schools. It was great to hear the superintendent open up this meeting with a celebration of Diwali. So things like cultural highlights, student and staff spotlights, being able to highlight members of your community with diverse backgrounds or interests. Student club celebrations with kind of public and posted calendars of events to really get the word out about all of the different elements of diversity happening across the district and the community. Other awareness campaigns that we recommend based on our equity audit: anti-bullying campaigns, kindness campaigns, connecting across Franklin campaigns. So really building out time for building trust and community between teachers, families, leaders, and students, really having relationship building and structured time to build that kind of rapport, and highlighting those and other SEL efforts happening in the district. And a few of the related findings for those, again, these are experiences and perceptions that were shared with us. An overall lack of understanding of the issues, both within schools, staff, students, community members. We heard questions around the necessity of focusing on DEI due to the perceived lack of diversity in the Franklin community. There was also a perception that students felt that there was sometimes intentional ignorance regarding the use of pronouns and other issues related to students in the LGBTQIA community. And so just that lack of understanding, one of the things that we think that the awareness campaigns can get at is helping to build that, as well as a perception of a lack of learning opportunities for students. And so staff expressed wanting equitable access for students and providing students the appropriate opportunities to learn about these topics. Some students expressed frustration that while there are some opportunities to learn, the lack of accountability or expectations for all students to learn more about these issues meant that the students who weren't choosing to opt into these groups or these learning experiences were the ones who actually really needed it the most. And so wanting more opportunities for that learning and understanding across the community and not within pockets. And then finally, there are external influences on the district culture and climate that are beyond the scope and control of the Franklin Public Schools leadership and do have large consequences within the schools. So we did hear pervasive misperceptions of DEI work in general and a lack of understanding of matters related to equity across the community, both in community focus groups, staff, and student ones. For example, the conversation that is going on nationally around critical race theory, the appropriateness of content in schools. And we saw that a lot in Franklin and heard it from a lot of different stakeholders. And we believe that while those external influences are outside of the scope and control of the district leadership, these awareness campaigns could go a long way towards kind of moving the needle here on community understanding and appreciation of the issues. So in terms of the next steps, as I mentioned before, there's a long full report available that the district has already been working with and really building off of in really great ways. There are a total of 38 findings that all have multiple related recommendations and analysis and data points and visualizations that touch in each of the equity audit focus areas. And digging into each of these findings will really help Heidi and the DEI task force really organize and prioritize actions, plans, and goals for the district moving forward. And as was shared earlier, really wanting to leverage those priority areas identified in the audit and aligned with the findings for use in the planning, the multi-year action plan starting from year zero, identifying those short, medium, and long-term goals to really make an impact for each and every student in Franklin Public Schools. So thank you so much. It has been a pleasure working with you all over the last 6 months. And I am happy to have been invited to be here and speak to you tonight.
Thank you, Amanda. I think, do you want to pause and just ask questions?
Yeah, if we could just, I figure we'll break it up into easier pieces. So I guess if anyone has any questions now on what's been presented so far, and then we'll continue. So Camille?
I think I'll wait until the end, after the second part of the presentation.
Okay, is there anything specific
I don't have
for
anything
Amanda?
specific for Amanda.
Okay.
I wrote down a question, but it was answered.
Dave?
Yeah, Dave, I got a couple things, but just in terms of directly to Amanda, first, thank you so much for packaging this all together and for this great presentation. Truly appreciate it. One question I had, we kind of saw it coming up. It's a trend a lot when talking about like the students. It's like a lack of trust, lack of support, lack of action. In the report, and I do want to kind of maybe circle back to this during like phase 3, but in the report, you talk about like there's that perception. Mm-hmm. And now when you say that, is that, it's this is just the perception, but we don't kind of have data to back it up, or the perception is that we had studied it and looked into it, and the outcome was that it was just perception. If you could just kind of elaborate on that for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we wanted to be very careful about language that we use when presenting these findings. And when saying perception, the perception in and of itself is a finding. And so what we wanted to make sure that we were communicating was not that every single thing that was shared in a focus group, in an interview, in an email is the absolute truth of what is going on in the district or not going on in the district, full stop. Instead, talking about these are the perceptions that are out there, and our recommendations are going to be based on those perceptions. And sometimes the recommendation is communicate better about what you're doing because we know that you're doing X, Y, and Z really well. And sometimes the recommendation is we haven't seen any kind of evidence that you are doing X, Y, and Z, so start doing it. But wanting to make sure that when we were presenting findings that were some of the findings that were more based on the qualitative data and on the what was shared with us in focus groups, in emails, in interviews, that we're being very clear that we take individual perceptions very seriously. And we think that the district should as well, while also making it clear that it came from these qualitative conversations and not necessarily from our firm's kind of data analysis of what we had seen.
Thank you very much for that clarification. I appreciate that. And something else too, actually, just in just kind of more broadly. One of the things we were talking within about like the discipline matrix and talking about like a deeper learning for some of the issues that are going on. And almost immediately actually kind of brought me back, Lucas, when you were talking about the vaping, that, the number one thing isn't to stop, kids from being disruptive and vaping in the bathrooms, but for their own personal health and to kind of teach them. I think that's definitely something that we, should be striving, for. I know that, unfortunately last spring, we had the anti-Semitic incident over at the baseball game. And while we can't kind of talk about some of the consequences that happened, after the findings, I would certainly always hope that, the students that are saying those things or engaging in that type of behavior, it's more than just discipline, but it's that deeper learning of, all right, this is why that stuff is so horrible and hateful to be saying. And so I hope that that's something we kind of continue and really stress that taking the forefront. Again, it sounds like that already is, but I just want to.
This is a continued work. This is pretty deep work, and we're committed to. I will say, with regard to the discipline matrix, our first step when we had knowledge that this was an area, we knew that we had to kind of come up with how can we create some rules of the game. So if folks go to the handbooks tonight, they can see like if this violation occurs, these are, and then we have consistency. So we thought first step, let's just put out so that the perception that nothing is done. If we have a finding, we can't necessarily say that Dave Callahan, let me tell you about what his discipline is, but we can say like when students look at the handbook, if they engage in this, the second part of that is twofold. When we have a situation, and I'll use bullying as an example. If we have a finding of bullying, we have a matrix that I think we will continue to develop and evolve. but the intervention piece is what you're speaking to. So our goal is to start to build out like what are the interventions that would take place, and can we front load those for families and students, and teach families on what that would look like to kind of round off. It's not just discipline, but how do we help someone who's engaged in something learn from it in an effective way? So, and then there's also the proactive pieces that we hit on earlier around advisory and things that this all needs to happen in concert. In addition to equipping our families with some messaging on why bullying, is bad and how they can help with that. So it's definitely a big picture, but that's the idea with our discipline matrix and kind of the direction we want to move.
Thank you very much. And Amanda, thank you again. Really appreciate it.
Al?
Yep. So first of all, I just want to say thank you, Amanda, for sharing the methodology that you've taken. It's great to see, or at least hear, how that you've kind of included many folks from different backgrounds, different areas, just so that they can be in a space that's comfortable to speak to their experiences and perception. I think that's one of the things that folks may not necessarily do in a general setting. They may feel they want to hold back, and I think being able to get folks to speak and share their experiences is one way that we can learn and grow and just move forward and do better as people. I guess my questions will be more towards how do we take this body of work and transition into the action plan that we're doing for the district, and how do we really tie everything together and see deliverables? So I think I'll wait further for the rest of the presentation for the further questions. But I think this is a great start just to really level set and make sure folks are at the right starting point and really creating an equitable experience, to use the phrase, and then move forward from there. So thank you.
Dave?
So thank you very much, Amanda, for both your work with this equity audit as well as for coming here tonight to present it. Just a quick clarifying question. You mentioned with the risk ratios, how those are also observed in other communities, not unique to Franklin. By that, did you mean that in general, risk ratios are observed, or similar risk ratios to what we're seeing in Franklin are observed?
Yes, thanks for that clarification. I meant that these kind of disproportionality is observed elsewhere. We see research shows that particularly male students, particularly Black and Brown male students, are at a much higher risk of discipline infractions and receiving disciplinary actions than other students. You see that across the country. And so that's not to say that it as an excuse or that makes it okay, but just to say that these kind of challenges are not unique to Franklin, and there are ways to focus on them, knowing that there's a lot of research out there that supports different ways to get at that those discipline disproportionalities.
Thank you very much. And just a quick follow-up to that. So this is a discipline matrix that you're recommending. Do you have either model discipline matrix, or are you aware of other districts that have implemented a similar one to that you're recommending that maybe we could share and take some recommendations from?
Yes, and so we actually shared an example, or I think a couple examples, with the leadership team over the summer as we started talking about this. And I know that they've already started doing some really great work that I think that they're going to get into shortly. But yes, absolutely, we have those.
Thank you very much.
We did add the first phase of, if you look in the handbooks now, you'll see the discipline and matrix in our handbooks currently, but certainly it's something we can build off of. But rather than cut and paste something in and call it something, we wanted to kind of own that and work through and bring people along and work with our community to kind of bring that into more of a full development. So thank you.
Elise?
Hi, Amanda. Thank you for your work on this. I really like the 6 buckets that you had there, the leadership. I think I wrote some of them down: climate and culture, student outcomes, HR practices, et cetera. Where did those come from? Is that something that's from PCG, or is that something that comes from a standardized tool or some research?
So this is actually one that we developed within PCG based on a lot of other research-based frameworks. I'm happy to share it, and I believe that we have some citations in the full equity audit report that we're sharing. But there's a few tools that we have used that are nationally recognized kind of research-based equity tools. And we have taken pieces from a lot of them and kind of developed this framework for ourselves based on a lot of that.
Okay, thank you. So are those research-based frameworks and the tools included in the report?
The full report, yes.
Okay, thanks. And it's so helpful to have a third party talk with members of our school community to gather information and analyze it objectively. Can you give an estimate of the percentage of qualitative data that was collected versus the percentage of quantitative data, just like a rough estimate? Because it seemed like there was a lot of perceptions and perspectives and some of the DesiDART data, but I wasn't sure about sort of the balance of that.
Yeah, so I think that that's a great question. That's a first for me in these questions. I don't know about the percentage. I think that one of the things that you'll see when you look at the full report, because the full report is, I think, 130, 150 slides long. And so there's a lot of quantitative data analysis around achievement and access and things like that. But what in our experience, what often feels the most kind of powerful and kind of immediately impactful are those qualitative perceptions and experiences of students and members of the community. And so when we're thinking about priority recommendations, like the two that I shared today, we have the qualitative data around the discipline risk ratios and disproportionality, but hearing consistent kind of stories and perceptions from students across these focus groups and conversations around how they feel about bullying, about discipline, about consistency across the district really felt like it was really important to highlight. We have more quantitative analysis in the full report in terms of, X number of focus groups mentioned the need for training on Y topic. But I would say close to 50-50 in terms of quantitative and qualitative. It may be more heavily weighted towards qualitative because we do really want to put importance on the voices and experiences of folks who are, historically marginalized and whose voices may not have been heard in other situations. So I might weight it a little bit more towards qualitative, but we looked at a lot of quantitative stuff too.
I appreciate it. And I definitely, value both. They're both important in their own right. And I think it's sort of a tricky line to walk, that you walk because it's like you hear certain perspectives and that perspective is reality for that student or for that family. And you don't want to discount that because that is something that happened to them. But you also don't want to make an overgeneralization that says every junior in high school has experienced this one situation
Absolutely.
or heard this thing in the hall. And so it's sort of tricky there. So it's trying to look at, I guess, like the qualitative to sort of paint some of the details of the pictures, but then the quantitative to look at sort of recurring patterns or themes. Okay, I appreciate that. And one other thing came up. And I do wonder, is there a way to sort of get the best of both worlds in a way? And it made me sort of think of the panorama type of survey, right?
Phase 3, we can talk about how we can continue to gather more quantitative data in
to
addition.
Ask similar type of questions, but it's anonymous and then you get sort of numbers on them.
This is, yes, we can speak to that. We will.
Okay, but thank you, Amanda.
Yeah.
Megan?
Hi, thank you, Amanda, for your presentation. And I just had a couple of comments. And good data it's very critical, to be able to, process that, make decisions, and helps with, determining if something is a problem or a symptom of a problem, just kind of getting to the root of that. And as far as like, sort of like, inappropriate, student actions or comments, it's important for them to know, why something's inappropriate, not just that it is, right? So there's a list of things that they avoid getting, caught doing, but just understanding how it impacts others. All right, that's all I got.
Thank you. Mr. Jagir, if you wanted to continue.
Sure. All right. Thank you, Amanda. So just to set context for the next piece, what we've done is we've taken those 106 slides and put together a presentation that represents all the elements so that we had something we could work off of, we can share with you, share with our community, and kind of move forward. To set some context, each community across the state is engaging in this work, and everyone's trying to find their own entry point. I know I spoke with some of my colleagues. Some of them are conducting equity audits now, or they're scheduling. We did ours. So this equity audit took place in the spring with the number of folks that were included either in focus groups and emails. So that snapshot, things have occurred since then, but certainly would want to point out that our entry point is we have an audit, we're sharing the findings now, and it's one piece of a big puzzle, right? So to just echo what I heard mentioned is the elevated voice of folks who were interviewed may be a problem or a symptom of a larger problem, but certainly as a district, our standpoint is we now owe it to our school community to dig deeper. And you'll hear about some of the steps we'll take to try to do that, but an audit is one piece. And I would want to emphasize that just because we now, like the work starts now for us on how do we continue to work. And it feels like sharing this information now with folks gets us on the same page with what came out of the audit. We also are ready at the bottom of this slide. You'll see we will hear about the strengths they found. We'll hear about the findings, the recommendations they have, and then we put a slide after it that, we built out these slides, but the second slide of each of those topic areas that Elise talked about, the
buckets.
Yep, the buckets. Our progress to date that we want to report out on, and then what we see as future actions. So once again, this is part of a larger framework, and we're in year zero. We've used that term because we're really trying to figure out our next steps and how do we engage our community and bring people along. And this certainly isn't about calling people out, but calling people in. And that's how we see it, and that's how we're going to frame this. So moving forward.
So I would like to start. I'm going to start with the leadership policies and practices bucket, as we call it. So some of the strengths that came out of this is that there was an overwhelming, unified, and strong desire from all district staff to improve the equity-related work. Everyone had this strong desire to do it, and we're really responding to these suggestions and changes that are being offered to us, and we really want to make those changes. This is important work, and we want to make sure we do it and we do it well. The other strength that came out of this is also that we have already started to create safe spaces for our students. Spaces where we can hear their voice and we can listen to their voices and take action. As Amanda mentioned earlier, some of the findings that came out of this category is that there's concerns about a lack of communication regarding the bullying and harassment incidents that happened. Parents and students and community members are really feeling like they don't know what happens. What are the consequences that come out of the investigations? And again, as Amanda mentioned, the lack of consistency amongst different groups and inequitable discipline practices. And then our staff are really voicing that they're really not sure how to handle those bias-based behaviors when they initially happen. They understand that the districts take steps, we communicate, we investigate, but it's really when they hear them in the moment, they're not sure what to do. So some of the recommendations that came out of this is really the district needs to make decisions on policies and practices and procedures with an equity lens. We really need to look at everything through that equity lens and make sure that we are making informed decisions. That we really need to embed our equity work in our professional learning communities and sharing equity-focused PD opportunities with our staff as well as parents and stakeholders. And they really would like us, and again, getting to that communication piece, is really design a protocol for communicating the outcomes to students and families after incidents and investigations occur. And really communicating. This is what we heard. This is how we understood it. This is what we're doing next. And this is what, unfortunately, we cannot share with you and why. And really focusing on that. So we'd like to now talk to you what we've been doing, right? We didn't start, as Lucas said, we're at year 0, but we have been doing some work along the way. We're at 0 in regards to our equity plan, but we've been doing some work over the years because we feel it's so important. So as you heard through our different school committee presentations and our handbook presentations, we really looked at our bullying, harassment, and discrimination in Title IX process and procedures and our policies, and we revised those. We've already done a 2-part civil rights bullying harassment training for our administrators in regards to investigating. And Title IX, yes, thank you, Lucas. As we've shared a few times this evening, we've looked at our discipline matrix. We've added that to the handbook, so there's a better understanding for both students and families on what consequences and what responses we'll have when a disciplinary infraction occurs. As we spoke of earlier, we've done our equity training, leadership training with Mirko Chardon from Novak Associates. We've established our DEI vision and goals through our DEI committee. And of course, we're so excited to have hired Heidi as our DEI coordinator. So what's our next steps? Al Charles has asked us, what are we doing next? So we're going to continue to work on our belonging and social identity training with both our staff and students. Lucas, Tina, Heidi, and I are participating in a Massachusetts Ready training from the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents, Ready standing for Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And we're going to use our work and our learning from those workshops to guide our work for the district. We will also continue our planning with Equity by Design for Universal Design for Learning, to making sure all our students have access to all opportunities within the classroom and school settings. And then as we talked about, continue to develop out that discipline matrix, look at the samples that PCG provided to us, and also work with our administrative team to continue to develop those.
Okay, so moving into our next bucket, curriculum instruction and professional learning. PCG highlighted some really great strengths here in Franklin's. The first being that Franklin has provided opportunities for real intentional discourse in the classrooms. They really elevated the idea of there's more student discourse than ever in STEM classrooms specifically, which was a really significant strength. The idea that the district has long-term goals of infusing the DEI lens into each unit of study, this kind of speaks to the curriculum work that we talk to so often around professional development days, professional learning, and really having a critical and keen eye towards our curriculum development and the resources that we're bringing in to support the various curriculum needs. They also identified that there's been a focus on diversification of textbooks and books in libraries. And though, that is definitely a strength, we recognize that there's more work to do, that this is an ongoing cyclical process that is embedded in our curriculum review. And then the last strength there being the learning for justice resources have been extremely helpful in learning how to interrupt microaggressions and bias-based behaviors. And so you'll see kind of, as we move to the next slide, some of the continuation of that work, but those are some strengths related to curriculum instruction, professional learning that came out of the audit. And then the 2 findings that came from the realm of curriculum instruction and professional learning, the first being that there is a lack of inclusive curriculum practices, and that there is a real desire to improve and increase learning around DEI work, which I think is a really great finding in itself. So the first recommendation you see there speaks specifically to the first finding, where they're recommending a creation of a standards equity-based process for curriculum development and delivery. And this speaks to our role in the Office of Teaching and Learning and really trying to flesh out our curriculum revision process and cycle, and really trying to put that process and procedure down on paper. So that's some of the work ahead of us this year. And then the next 3 recommendations speak to the real desire to continue the learning within our FPS community related to learning foundations of around equity. What is equity? You've heard that. Like we say it. What do we mean when we say it? Around how to support LGBTQIA plus students and create a more inclusive and anti-bullying school community. And then the last being more training around culturally responsive leadership and teaching. So the second piece to this is to update the progress to date and then the future work that we're looking towards. So on the left, you'll see there some of the things Paula alluded to. I think there's a lot of, there's a through line between all of this work, and even in the various buckets that we're calling them. So particularly here we have, we brought Mirko Chardin in to focus on universal design for learning. We're also talking about universal design for learning in our PD days. We're also talking about that in our faculty meetings, in our department meetings, in our half profession, so there's some through lines here. We have implemented with the support of ArcSed our mandated non-discrimination and harassment trainings are all now digital and online and more accessible. Continuing to focus on belonging and identity in our professional learning, and we'll be excited to give you kind of an update after our full professional development day and the work that we do there. Our partnership with the Anti-Defamation League, and then as it connects to the first finding related to curriculum, really building out our curriculum revision process through the literacy audit and the literacy pre-K to 12 literacy curriculum review that's underway. And then you can see on the next portion there, the future actions, and really trying to expand. We have some really great work that's happening with World of Difference leaders and curriculum, and how do we expand that? So we're going to be looking to do that work in the future. Again, continuing on the realm of identity and belonging, professional learning, and including more of that. Our partnership with Mirko Chardin and Equity by Design, where you'll hear about some more opportunities to engage families and opportunities to learn alongside of us and dig into this work with us, alongside of us, and really being able to provide a space that we're listening to various stakeholders in an authentic way. And I think you'll hear the through line in that in the upcoming slides.
Okay, so I have the climate. I have the climate and culture bucket, and there are a lot of through lines. It may sound repetitive, but they live in multiple places. Some of the strengths that PCG highlighted for under culture and climate is that there's a shared desire to move the equity work forward in its entirety, and that there was a deep sense of pride in Franklin. They also noted that they also noted a strength is that Franklin Public Schools is providing space for students to understand topics of equity while shining light on the need for equity district-wide. Students noted some positive actions in schools such as the ADL, World of Difference, SAGA, the Gender Awareness Club, and others. There's a focus on student wellness and allowing students the opportunity for self-expression. And they also thought that the DEI, the work product of the DEI, was very strong and a strength. Some of the other findings were that bullying is perceived as a pervasive problem, that there was a lack of action when bullying and discrimination incidents occurred. There was a perceived lack of support for LGBTQ plus students and preferential treatment for athletes or popular students, as was mentioned before. Mixed views about trust and communication between staff and students, and there were some barriers between family engagement and the school communities. Their recommendations were that we do more family engagement activities and put more family engagement supports in place, do more development around trust and communication, and more student or engage in student, family, and community learning and training around opportunities, as Tina said, around the foundations of equity. So progress to date. We have gender neutral language practices, advisories at the secondary, middle, and high. We have an active DEI committee and a monthly DEI newsletter that comes out from me to the principals so that they can share and be current with what's happening within the community and share that within their school communities. And we have a diversity calendar, and we have upcoming community listening sessions. Future actions. So it is a future focus is, continuing with this listening tour, really making ourselves available to hearing all the voices within the Franklin community. Hosting virtual community coffees for families by school compounds or school campuses. There we go. Revising or building a DEI webpage, a living library. And Lucas, I don't know if you want to just talk a little bit about that after I finish, or do you want
Sure.
Okay. We have the newsletter already coming out. We talked about developing hopefully for the end of this school year is establishing a back to school community welcome center service so that the back to school information is actually taken to the community where families, especially our L communities, may have difficulty accessing all of the information they need before the beginning of the school year. We also talked for our future actions is expanding student clubs and support groups and the creation of restorative practices to support students and families when bias incidents occur. So the other bucket is student outcomes and access. And the strengths there were current supportive efforts underway, such as Best Buddies, the Diversity Awareness Club, ADL Peer Leaders, the Unified Sports, and the Bridges/Resource Group. The findings were that there were supports needed for gifted students. There were inequitable resource distribution, inequitable access to after school and extracurricular activities, and MCAS proficiency gaps for students with disability, L students, economically disadvantaged students, and Black, African American, Hispanic, and Latinx students. And the recommendations were to expand access to extracurricular activities, develop some kind of equity student data reporting or reports, provide professional learning on implicit bias for school counselors and department leaders, and adopt an equity-based resource process for resource distribution decision-making. And progress to date is that we reinstated the after-school transportation. There are advisory programs at the middle and high school, and we're aligning. There's aligned level-based school improvement plans focusing on MTSS and future actions. We're talking about, again, just developing those restorative practices so that we can support students and families, all families when something happens, expand student clubs and support groups, and have constant conversations and, workshops for students around belonging and identity to build an inclusive community.
So just an example of a snapshot in time. If you think back, we weren't able to run late buses last year. So we had a population of students who couldn't stay after for a club or activity if they couldn't get a ride home. So since then, we've been able to bring back our late buses. So just an example, I think, when you were hitting on that. The other piece is the idea of a living library is really a human library. It's certainly a big endeavor to organize, but there's a professional organization that provides guidance on this. But basically, rather than lending out books, you work with people, and you can, in order to understand each other. We talked about belonging. Remember that definition that was on the slides? It was when we know more about each other, we can understand each other better. And are there opportunities that are just like a library? You go and you want to know more about someone, about their religion, about their life, some specific area or characteristic. It's an opportunity to take, instead of taking a book out, you take a human out and you ask some questions. So it's not a new concept, but we did talk about that a little bit. We also talked about that when we had the opportunity to meet with the new chancellor from Dean College, and that idea we floated across the table. So there was some interest there as well. So maybe expanding that idea within the community. So moving on. So human resources. So we had some strengths that we basically have taken steps to make sure that we are, using an equity lens when we hire. But certainly in our descriptions, we ask questions when we think about what we ask. Typically, a teacher, a director, a principal, there'll be some specific question around diversity, equity, inclusion. What does that mean? What does that look like in that specific role, or how would they apply that lens as they continue their work? When we look at training for admin, training was conducted last year with regard to screening practices to just make sure that we were using consistent practices across all of our 10. We have 10 schools. We have 10 principals, and we have central office administration. Many people are putting eyes on applicants and candidates, and are we consistently looking for the qualities that we expect? So depending on the role, we want to look at work experience, and we had a training that helped us with that. And we have systems to record demographic data, which they had noted as strengths. When we think about findings, really the piece that came out from the audit that took place last spring was around how do we, there's gaps in representation. I think if I had to summarize the findings in one sentence, it would be, how do we put more adults in front of kids that look like them in the right way? And we maintain that, we have, there's a desire within our system to find highly qualified adults and really try to look for ways we can make that happen. The recommendations, basically looking at all of our job descriptions. So if we've had a posting in the last 2 years, we've been sure to refresh those, but there are some jobs we haven't posted necessarily for. So how do we continue that work would be, as we post things, we certainly look at that with a fresh eye, but just making sure that we continue to look at those job expectations. And they've recommended setting some measurable value-aligned goals around workforce diversity, and use strategies to use data to guide the work around recruitment and tracking demographic data. And so our progress to date, one piece I would speak to is, you heard about our aligned level-based school improvement plans, where really this just highlights our consistency that we're aiming for across. So when we look to hire adults that will work with our students, trying to have some aligned expectations for what those jobs are. So we have consistency by level and what the person would be doing and how they'd be doing it. And that helps us to have consistency when we evaluate people's criteria and whether they're qualified for a position or not. The future actions, we are rejoining the Mass Partnership for Diversity in Education, which provides training and support. We will continue with implicit bias training for all of our staff who are involved with any kind of hiring or evaluating. And then we would look to build upon the training that I referenced earlier as we move forward. So next steps, just to point out where we are. So fall 2022, we talked about, we're sharing tonight information. I would emphasize this is a presentation on DEI as a holistic idea and trying to talk through. We also referenced the findings from the audit. And then we really need to now prioritize steps. We need to think about, we've been given some priorities from the company, but how do we now look at not only implementing the recommendations that they put forward, the two that they have, but spend time now with our own work and trying to dive deeper. Someone asked about panorama, like surveying our students, our families, and our staff to build out a complete picture. The points around the audit and elevating voices from the focus groups and whatnot is a piece of that puzzle. But there's other pieces we need to now gain so that we can make informed decisions about the steps that we take and what needs to be prioritized. And this is work that takes place over time. So my message to everyone in our community is takes time. There are people on both sides of this issue. And unfortunately, this type of work has become somewhat politicized. But if I could just share just the human being in me, we're really trying to focus on our bar is at trying to create spaces where kids can walk in and feel welcomed and belong and not have negative experiences that lead to some kind of pain. And I think that's really where we're at with this, is really trying to start there. And if we're going to do this well, no matter where you fall on your opinions of this, it's really about setting expectations to move slow and move together. And I think that's the commitment that I wanted to share, and I know we share as a team, is really trying to look at this and gather more information and dig deeper and engage with our community and hear the varying perspectives, because that is what this work is. So I would end with that and let you know that at the end of the year, our goal is to come back and report out. We've done a deeper dive. I probably will hearken back to, you may remember the audit listed a few findings that were available to us. We've dug a little deeper, and here's where we've landed. And these are the goals that we will prioritize for the next school year. And then we're not going to do all 56 goals or recommendations in a year. That's not the intention, and that's not the intention from PCG at all. But we need to move with our community. We need to move with our staff and our students. So I'll stop there and open it up for questions.
Okay. So on behalf of the school committee, thank you for this very thoughtful and thorough presentation. We know so much has gone into this at all levels. So please extend our gratitude to everyone who has been involved for all that has been done for our students and for the entire district. Being mindful of the time, if we could go through and if there's any questions, Camille?
I had one question. If you could expand on the finding of lack of inclusive curriculum practices.
So I can. So what was identified in this particular finding is, and I'll just specifically read some of these particular ones from their full report. There's a lack of exploration of multiple religions and cultures. There is no formal teacher inclusive process for choosing curriculum. The curriculum does not include current ideas about gender and diversity. The curriculum and curriculum support is needed for students in the ESL population. Great. So those were the sub bullets within that finding. So.
And my only other, I'd like to take a minute to just state how important this work is. And I appreciate that your presentation showed the diversity of DEI, because as Lucas said, sometimes it gets politicized and it's a very narrow and incorrect definition of DEI. I myself can't really understand the pushback against DEI. When I look at Chapter 5, Section 2 of the Massachusetts Constitution, which is the oldest still functioning written constitution in the world, one of the objectives is about education is to countenance and inculcate the principles of humanity and general benevolence, public and private charity, industry, frugality, honesty, punctuality, sincerity, good humor, and all social affections, generous sentiments among the people. And that's, to me, cherishing our citizens, cherishing our children, and cherishing the staff that teach them. When I try to be empathetic and compassionate and think about why people might object to this kind of work, I think possibly they see the world in a zero-sum game. That if somebody else is receiving attention or uplift, that means they get less. And that's just not the way it works. I mean, it's your heart just expands for more. We also do a disservice to our students by not ensuring diversity, equity, and inclusion. First of all, children cannot learn. They cannot physically learn if they feel traumatized, if they feel they don't belong, if they feel threatened, if they feel unsafe in the classroom. I mean, there's an old thing we teachers always hear when you first start. They don't care what you know until they know that you care. Students also learn best when they feel connected to their world, and pretending these issues of class, race, culture, religion, gender, sexual orientation don't exist for these students is ignorant. They are interacting with these issues every day in their lives, online, in their friend groups, and they feel a yearning to discuss it in class, to encounter it in class, to encounter it with teachers who are prepared and professional and comfortable doing that. So I appreciate your focus on and the staff's recognition that they need professional development to feel comfortable. It is uncomfortable to discuss these things in class, but with more practice and with training, it becomes much more comfortable. Students also, if we don't allow them these conversations and we don't pay attention to how we're treating all of the members of our community, then students won't be prepared for the workforce. They're going to work in a diverse workforce. They're going to live in a diverse world. And a study I looked up, 96% of companies think that diversity and the ability to work with a diverse group of people is important. So if we care about workforce ability, then we have to prepare our kids for encountering difficult or uncomfortable situations, having critical thinking skills to navigate their ways through them, and treating other people like humans. I suppose that the visibility of marginalized groups, if they were formerly invisible, then any sort of uplift, any sort of extra effort to educate about them or to honor them may seem like promotion of one particular view or promotion of something that is just a grotesque and poisonous distortion of what DEI is, then I suppose that might seem threatening to some people. But there's plenty of space. And finally, the reason why we do this is because the world we're living in is so contentious and so fraught with discord and frankly frightening sometimes the way the othering happens. Genocides happen because other people's humanity is discounted and taken away. You can commit crimes against others. So if we don't do this work and give them practice now, and we don't honor and cherish every student who walks through our doors, then we are doing a disservice to the future of this planet. That's it.
Dave Callahan.
Yes, I got, well, one, thank you very much for the presentation. And I want to open just, by saying, I kind of appreciate that we're walking the walk here. As I'm watching the Zoom feed down below, see a live captioning that's happening as we're having this conversation. And so, right, then and there, for individuals deaf and the hard of hearing community, that they're still able to be included and to be a part of this conversation. Lucas, when you kick things off, talking about the root of it all, that it's belonging, is, I thought was fantastic to hear. And then when you kind of showed, some of the pictures, and it sounded like the unified basketball team. And, when you talk about, that's literal gold standard for belonging. And, this is, just one of the many reasons as to why we're doing this. And it was a fantastic start. I was going to say too, to see, everyone, so many members up here at the desk, As Amanda had mentioned, this isn't just one person's work. This is a collective body of work that's, being shouldered by so many members of the community. And, just in terms of, kind of walking the walk too, I know we've talked about this in the past, but I'd really be remiss not to throw my support for, as we kind of build next year's school calendar, for introducing Diwali as a school day off. So I just want to throw that out there right now. I have a couple of questions. Maybe I'll just kind of throw one out right now. All right. We talked about equitable resource distribution. I know we see we kind of see that already being done with the strategic initiatives, really how it's flattening. It wasn't just, multiple elementary schools that each had their own initiatives that they were in, guiding lights, but this is just one flat across the board. This is what everybody is looking for, which is great. Can we expect to kind of see these philosophies and ideas as we're moving forward with redistricting efforts?
So my quick answer would be yes. There's a process that will unfold that will bring our community through along the way. But one thing that the company that we're working with is interested in is context. And it's not a math problem. If it was a math problem, we wouldn't need to bring anybody together. We could just crunch some numbers and draw some lines and whatnot. But context matters. And I think they're looking, I know that they've requested information from us that speaks to demographic data that would be helpful in this work. And I think our goal is to look at all of those pieces and what makes the most sense. And when you think about where students are heading to school, how are we making sure that we build a lens around equity and making sure that it's equitable for all? So the answer is yes. And I think your original question that you asked earlier around resources that's an annual conversation that we need to have every year about where do we need resources for the students we have in front of us, regardless of what school they're at. So that's it's a great example of what we would do. And we would probably continue that work, I know, through our engagement with principals who are strong advocates for their students across the board as we talk through our budget process. And resource allocation is a driver, obviously, of budget. So.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Other questions? But I figure it's one.
No.
All right. So we go on one question, or are we just go? Okay. So first of all, thank you for this. This has been great. I think it showed how you put everything together from PCG to incorporating into our district plans for different DE&I. I think just the focus on that this is not something that's going to be addressed and completed in a year. This is a long-term process, and we're at year 0, which is, I think it's a great approach, where we're just really just gathering the data now and really looking to see where do we stand and developing our plan. I feel that people think the expectation we start something, it should be done, and we should get a end result quickly, and it's not that case. And the way you framed up is a great way to just kind of make people aware. It is a journey. Couple things that jumped out at me that were really, really great. It was really around that communication piece. I think that's first and foremost critical when it comes to DE&I. I feel like there are a lot of misconceptions, and as people have missing information, they will just choose to fill in the blanks with whatever will fit in those puzzle pieces. And by being clear and consistent and transparent will help, especially when it comes to disciplinary practices. I think that's where we hear a lot of the problems may stem from, because they may not see that action. And yes, you said, Ms. Morano, as you said earlier, we may not say exactly what has happened, but let them know that something has happened and there is action being taken goes a lot further than saying nothing, and where people will just assume nothing also has happened. So I think that's a great starting point in getting people aligned and understanding there is work being done, and we will give you the information that we can without compromising confidentiality. So great purpose there. The focus on bias, commend you all for getting a third party consultant to help with that, because we all have biases as people, and you cannot identify your own bias without somebody pointing it out to you. I find this myself with my children all the time. My wife would say you're biased to one child versus the other, and it's like, well, you know what? You're right. I understand it. And you got to take a step back, and I feel that the school district needs that as well, and it's great that we have PCG. PCG is there to help and really highlight those, because you can't necessarily assess yourself all the time. And I feel that with this data, we will be able to do better. So one, thank you there. I've seen the equity in the curriculum that we're doing already, especially in the math work that we're doing, where we're looking at a different lens so that we can make sure that all of our learners can grasp those critical math skills versus just treating math as a one size fits all. And I feel that this will help us increase our MCAS scores. This will get our students to appreciate math even further. So I think DEI, it's bigger than just what people think of with gender, ethnicity. I mean, it goes through everything that we do. And if we infuse DEI in all these various lenses, we'll get folks to address and really get the word, just acclimate to the different technologies and the curriculums that we're bringing people up together. So I commend you once again for that. And then I feel that people also talk about DEI and think of the lowest common denominator. I was glad to hear that you talked about that there is a gap for the gifted program, the gifted students, and how do we care for their needs? Because it's not just one level, it's all groups, and looking to see how do we care for their needs, regardless of are they have needs, or are in terms of gaps for proficiency, or are the ways that we can bring them up even further. The work that we've done with the school lunches, it's a great way to take away some of the barriers to learning. I mean, we're giving free lunch now, and not all students take free lunch. They may still bring food in, but we're not penalizing, or kids are not suffering because they do not have that ability to get that meal during school and have to focus on that versus learning. So there's a lot of things from a DEI lens that folks need to be mindful of that really will help enhance the school district. And by doing so, once these students leave our district, they will be more apt to come back and say, hey, you know what, I want to raise my family here because I had that inclusivity. I felt that feeling of belonging, and I want my children to feel that, and we have more of a diverse community. So I see this as a win-win across the board for not just now, but our future in terms of the growth and really where Franklin goes 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. For questions, there was mention of a diversity calendar. Just hoping, can you elaborate a little bit more on that in terms of like what is that and who receives that?
I can answer that. We are in the process of developing that or continuing to build on that. I think that the DEI committee started that last year or the year before. And a few of us are continuing to add certain holidays, certain celebrations. This month, we made sure that we highlighted ADHD awareness and including really being inclusive of all diversity on that calendar. So it's not going out to the families, it's being captured and shared monthly to the school principals, and they share it within or distribute the information within their school communities.
Okay. Is that something maybe we can look to include in the just monthly newsletters as well, just to expand the reach of that to just
Sure. So the calendar Heidi's talking about is an educational calendar, so that we can educate. So I think that might be a great next step, is to just provide information. It's different from the question that came up around school calendar that Dave brought up, but there's a lot of things that happen throughout a month that we, the committee, felt were important to highlight and make sure that people had knowledge and education on, because you might not realize what other things are out there. So that was the good question and good clarifying point. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And then there was mention of rejoining the Mass Partnership for Diversity in Education. So the part that jumped at me was the rejoining piece. So were we part of that, and why did we?
That is a question I can't answer. I don't know if it was a matter of kind of a lapse during COVID and I don't really have a story to tell on that one. But I do know that we are committed to rejoin, and I can find out more if you'd like. But
Yeah, so I.
Oh, do you know?
I have just a little.
And I
Oh,
might,
thanks,
I might be
thanks.
able to build on the other
Look
piece.
at this. That's my routine.
So one of the subgroups of the DEI committee focused on the hiring. And within that subgroup, there were individuals that joined this, and it was last year, they were part of this work, I believe, where they joined the committee that you're referencing. So I think it's a recommitment to.
And I can add a little more context. Franklin Public Schools was a member of this committee many, many moons ago, a few superintendents back. And my understanding is it kind of participation kind of fizzled out. So we no longer participated after a while. I think there was not a feeling of value of outcomes that was coming out of the committee, but we are now rejoining it. And because for what I understand, it's restructuring.
Gotcha.
Is my understanding.
And it's on a virtual platform.
Yes.
So
So there's more access. That was the other piece too. I think people were coming from all different places and, prior to COVID, we weren't used to doing virtual
Yeah,
things.
so making the access a little bit more equitable. So
Absolutely. Exactly now. It's more equitable access for communities.
So great. No, so thank you. Appreciate this work. Looking forward to see where things come. But once again, it's not something that come December, it's going to be done and we're going to be here. This is all the solutions. This is year zero. We'll see where we go from here and how do we build on this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Dave?
Thank you all for being here for this presentation, and thank you for taking this work seriously. It's so important that we're doing this and that we really have the groundwork laid here to go forward. Diversity is our greatest strength as a nation, and we're all better off when diversity is valued and better decisions are made, and we all are better individuals and better as a community too when we value that. So thank you. Couple questions. Mentioned communication, how we're going to be really both with the campaigns as well as community outreach over the next few months and years in regards to this. Have we already started to hear recommendations on how we could have more inclusive practices from families?
So we are going to be engaging families on November 19th. We're going to have an opportunity for families to come together to engage in this work. The presentation will be available, obviously, for people to reference, and that will be an opportunity. As I mentioned also, we shared the audit, the findings, the recommendations today, but the reality is we want to continue to learn and kind of figure out what, we heard some perceptions, for example. How do we drill a little deeper and try to understand how do we quantify some of that or try to find themes that might emerge through that. But I think the engaging in the community, engaging with our staff in a productive way and bringing them along and giving them the tools they need. As you saw, there was a desire to do this work. And I can think of the Speak Up at School training, the feedback I received when we did that, which was basically how to kind of interrupt a microaggression, for example, that may occur. That was a positive experience from many of the folks that I spoke to at that time. And, we see this as work continuing. And, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. And then another question in regards to curriculum when we're reviewing that. What achievement gaps are we observing among different the different demographic subgroups that have been mentioned? I know I read through and in the report it mentions MCAS scores, particularly there that's highlighting. But are we observing other achievement gaps as well?
So what I would say is that we are in the trenches of analyzing the most recent MCAS results that just came out, and we have a presentation coming next school committee meeting. Mm-hmm. So I think I'd be more well equipped to answer that question at that point. What I will say is that there are some trends across the Commonwealth that we are seeing mirrored in Franklin, particularly like I would highlight writing across the Commonwealth. I think I don't want to quote the statistics without them in front of me. I'll wait till next meeting, but we do mirror that, our trend in writing has declined over time. But I think I can probably speak more to that at our next school committee meeting with the MCAS data in front of us.
And I think once we have the Panorama platform up and running, we'll be able to also kind of track the other data points other than MCAS to see if we find any trends. And I think that's our plan once we get that up and running.
Excellent, thank you.
Elise?
So I was so excited for this equity audit for many, many months and expected to get it last spring and then expected to get it last summer and then expected to get it earlier. And I feel like in a way it definitely shed some light on a few things, but I don't know if any of this is something the district didn't already know. And so I guess I'm wondering how much we paid for it, Miriam? Just ballpark, I guess. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Ballpark 45, 50 grand would be, I'm not even, I don't even think it was that high. I honestly don't have a ballpark in front of me. But I'll look it up while you're talking.
Right. Yes, you will. I know. I'm sure you'll get us that quickly. So I think my expectations were so high. And then I think the lack of a standardized tool, some of the lack of, in my personal opinion, organization and sort of like synthesis of it and sort of the way it was packaged, I feel like left a lot to be desired. And so I really am really grateful that you guys went through and did this, because I think this was easy to read through and it made a lot of sense sort of to consolidate things and put things in an orderly fashion. And I thank you for that. And I'm also sort of disappointed because I feel like that shouldn't be the district's job if we're paying an outside provider to be doing this work. It should have been done by the outside provider. But all that said, I think that it's a good, as you said in your last bullet here, it's good baseline data. It's sort of like a moment in time. This is data, this is evidence. A lot of it I think is from DESE, is from DART. Like we could get this information if we needed to, but it's nice that I think it's all in one place. This is something that can be referred to in the future. This will definitely show growth in the future or be a yardstick, I guess, to measure progress or regression in any way. But I think overall the deliverable, I was a little bit, I wish it was a little bit more robust. However, thank you for giving this sort of like piggyback presentation that really puts things in perspective. And I agree with my colleagues that the work is extremely important. And I think that's why I was so excited about it. But I did read it, and I'm going to look through again to look at the tools and the research that she mentioned, because that's really important to me, just as far as like sort of the fidelity of the process. But thank you for putting this part together for us.
Megan?
So yeah, thank you for the presentation. And I just really want to echo Camille's eloquent comments quoting of the Massachusetts Constitution. Thank you for that. And I'll also, this work it's not a zero sum thing, like Camille mentioned. And another analogy I like to use, it's not a pie, right? People get pieces of this pie, and it means someone else gets a smaller piece or something like that. That's not the case at all here. We're all humans, learning, interacting with one another, and we need to develop an understanding of what each of us needs. We're not all the same, in every single way. So some of us, need a little extra, and some of us are like, anyway. So just getting a good understanding of it and all that. And I'll just kind of just mention something out too, because I know, so there's a little bit of politicization to this. When I mentioned to people I brought in a DI, member for the school and stuff, there, sometimes there's a little bit of an eye roll, or sometimes and there's a lot of misunderstanding about, what this is, and it's elevating everybody, elevating every student. We all benefit from this. This is a win-win. And I'm really happy that we, have this. And thank you so much for the presentation. And Lucas, I do have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
The Living Library, who is involved in that? Is it students, staff, community members?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off in the middle of your question. So we listed it as a future action because there's a lot of work that would go into coordinating something like that. But I tried to explain that concept, and there's a framework. Folks can Google it right now and find a quick overview of what that entails. But basically, you find folks that want to be basically a library book, a human version, and offer opportunities, and people can come and check out a person and kind of talk about their experience. It could be a Vietnam veteran and you want to hear more about the war from their perspective, and you sit and talk and you listen to what that was like for that person. It could be someone who's disabled, you have questions about their experience. It could be a person of color because you're trying to learn more about it could be a religion that, tell me how you celebrate. I know I have friends who are of different religions, and I'm comfortable to ask them, but I also have access to people. So I might ask someone who's Jewish about their religions and what do each of the holidays mean to them. And I feel comfortable to do that. And I gain an understanding, and that's the best way I can probably learn that rather than a book, is tell me more about that. And the idea here is if we create opportunities like that where people can sit and talk to someone who has an experience, something, I think we could all gain from that. And like I said, this is not a concept I've certainly developed or thought of, but I'm really interested in this idea. And I think it could be really powerful when we think about how we work within our community and create learning. The trick is going to be, how do you set something up that people come to and be a part of? And how do you organize that in a way? So that's part of the work. So.
Well, I'd love to help out with that somehow.
Great.
I'd be happy to. And that would be great.
Great. I was going to have my dad come as a Vietnam vet, but he swears a lot, and I didn't want him talking to kids, to be quite frank, with his mouth. So anyway, I get the idea. I think there we go.
Ms. Goodman, I believe you had a follow-up.
Yeah, so I misspoke earlier. The contract that was signed in December of 21 for this work was for $24,950.
Oh, thank you for following up. So 25,000 is very different from the initial estimate. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Jagir, I know you and I had spoken previously about providing families with some kind of cheat sheet for all of the acronyms we use.
Yes.
Where are we on that?
So we thought we would do an EduSpeak mini presentation, not a full 3-hour presentation, but maybe provide a cheat sheet with the acronyms or all the things what we mean when we say, and maybe just use that as the anchor, and then have that posted and shared for folks. So I don't have it done, but I will.
I just want to make sure people know that we're working on it.
Sure. Absolutely.
Thank you.
We can put something together, turn it around.
So, Madam Chair, can I say one more thing?
Sure.
Thank you. And just to make sure folks, if anybody didn't catch it, was with Mr. Jagir talking about the Living Library, one thing that I appreciated that you had said was it's about the person's perspective. It's not that they're a representative of that group, because you could be a Vietnam veteran and your experience could be wildly different from others.
Yeah.
It's just to give you a glimpse of what one person has experienced. And I think that's one thing we all need to think of when we speak to people of different backgrounds or different diversities or different areas of interest. They're speaking to what their perspective is, and it's not necessarily representative of everybody. It's how they kind of what they saw and how their interactions kind of cared for or framed up their experiences. Just something, but great way to kind of frame it up.
Mr. Callahan, you had something else?
From May too, yeah, thanks. So I just have also a question. So we already, we've had the DEI committee who's, really been able to produce a great body of work. Now, with the DEI director, how does that change the DEI committee? Would we expect there, would more of, the director kind of take over some more of their work, kind of shrink the committee scope and scale?
Can I start and then you can chime in? And I don't want to over answer here, but we are advantaged where we had a DEI committee. We are continuing with that work. A lot of great work happens with that DEI committee. One thing that by having a director, it's, to me, the magic's in the in-between work. So now in between meetings, you have someone who's dedicated to moving this work along and preparing and following up and carrying out something that came from a group that led. And I think when Dr. Ahern led that work, I watched her work tremendously hard to do her superintendent job and be a DEI director at the same time and leading that work. And it's not lost on me. So the fact is that we have someone who can really work and drill down on this in more the in-between work. And it's great segue when you are all ready to talk about the plan, which really outlines Heidi's work and goals for the year that they complement the presentation that we provided. Do you want to add anything?
I'll just add that the DEI committee is essential to the work because it represents a group of stakeholders, and the work shouldn't be done just at a central office level or, school-based level. It does need to have a balance. So in addition to what you shared. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Are you all set? Moving on to the next presentation, the 2022-2023 DEI plan.
Okay, so if we can call that up. In your packet, you will find a DEI plan, which basically has the same cover. I won't use my Emmett Smith Nike joke, overuse that one, but certainly all of this information is the same as you've seen on the district and school-based plans. When we get into the goal areas, I would highlight, Heidi, I want you to help me if they have questions or add some clarity, but basically, if you look at 5A, 5B, and 5C, those are the three main goal areas. And Heidi, do you want to just give an overview of what those main goal areas are?
Sure. So there are three primary goal areas, which is 5A, to develop an equity action plan that meets the needs of all learners. Okay. Should I keep going or? And 5B, which is to strengthen level-based supports for students, staff, and site leaders, administrators. And C is the family engagement and community partnerships with DEI efforts. So, do you want?
Sure. I think that was a good overview. Maybe we could just talk through just the some of the action steps you plan to take.
Okay, sure. For 5A, in terms of the equity action plan, the action step is to kind of take the information, communicate recommendations from the equity audit. But it's also a constant, going back and communicating updates. This work is, according to Mass Ready, it's a 5 to 8 year process. Beginning the priority recommendations, the district, the discipline matrix, and the awareness campaign, hopefully within the next few months, and then providing opportunities for feedback and input from the community members. 5B, strengthen level-based supports for students, staff, and leaders. I think our goal areas or actually, I won't go into the sub goals, but I'll just stick with the action steps. To utilize the Mass Ready equity, diversity, racial equity, diversity, and inclusion framework to understand our point of entry, to connect with belonging and identity, to basically facilitate student groups at the high school, the middle schools, and explore ways to expand the elementary level mentoring program, co-lead the ADL World of Difference with staff advisors to facilitate a learning series to support middle and high school ADL leaders, create opportunities for the ADL leaders to mentor and teach other students, and partner with DESE's Safe School program to provide staff with professional learning focus on providing an inclusive and safe environment for all students, specifically LGBTQ plus students. And I think the last area would be to continue to support staff with professional learning opportunities and develop a district-wide equity toolkit to serve as a resource for staff. And by that, I mean just having a range of resources, tools, and supports available to all staff and faculty members. And it would live, like I said, on a virtual platform that we could continuously update, build, and share with our professional community. Same thing we were talking about having a similar platform for parents. And I'll just go into that really quickly. 5C, the family engagement and community partnerships. Again, having that platform, hosting a series of meetings to just kind of have informal discussions on equity-related topics, establish community coffee hours by school complexes, support families offering trainings to support families to build partnerships with schools to kind of amplify our two-way communication goal. And we would be using the MASS framework for family engagement. And as I think we talked about earlier, just kind of providing the back to school supports for families in our community. Back to school, the virtual or the mobile, it's not a virtual, it would be a mobile kind of back to school center.
We'll go through, Camille?
No questions.
Dave Callahan?
Thanks. One of the kind of questions I kind of brought up, I think first with Amanda, was talking about that kind of common, theme and perception, the lack of trust, of response and action. Initially I wanted to ask, so what are we doing to, to look into that and to work on that? And I see here though, a lot of the anticipated outcomes in the evidence, talking about both the discipline matrix, using the panorama to be able to really kind of track that, provide, especially this one, I love to provide a supportive school environment with opportunities to elevate student voice. That one right there specifically, might you be able to elaborate a bit more on, kind of what we can kind of see as, how that would be achieved? Because I do think that a lot of the findings of the equity audit about that lack of support, perceived or real, would really do well if we're able to elevate student voice.
So you're referencing an outcome, which is to provide opportunities to elevate. The goal related to that is to cultivate. It's the DEI director is the person. It's the goal for Heidi. This DEI plan is a district plan, but that particular goal is talking about further cultivating student relationships and learning more about student experiences across levels. So digging deeper and not take audit aside for a minute, just as an entry into the district, having Heidi engage with our students in a variety of settings. The outcome is that she learns more and elevates all student voice through those experiences. And I think that's what that speaks to. So the action steps speak to attending clubs, facilitating groups. We have talked about this before. We have the ADL peer leaders. Heidi is co-leading the ADL peer leaders as an example at our middle schools. So I would just say those are examples. And also we have an existing mentoring program at ParMentor that we want to see continue and grow and elevate. And I know that Heidi has some thoughts on that, but I think that's what that goal speaks to, is in an effort to try to elevate is how does she engage with all the different students that we have within our district.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Al?
So I guess more, that's the question. So in terms of bringing students together with these various groups and clubs, is there any thoughts on how we can get more cross-pollination with these groups so that they're not in silos, and a group that may not necessarily work with another group have that opportunity to get more exposure to each other? So I'll just think that we heard a lot of athletes, mention of athletes in the PCG feedback. Like, how do we get more of the athletic groups with maybe the Saga group, or vice versa, or just different things that don't necessarily mix today?
And I want to be careful to say that I wouldn't stereotype that all athletes are in that situation. It could be an experience a student had based on a student wearing an athletic jersey. That's what, once again, when I mentioned earlier in the couple hours ago in the superintendent's report, we talk about if students are at a game and they're fans and they're in our section and they're cheering and something comes up, it's beyond now just a student made this comment. It's a student from Franklin made this comment. It's the town of Franklin made this comment, and we've experienced that. So I'm cognizant of that. I think we would want to be clear about that. And I think one thing that Mr. Hanner has done with Miss Ellis, who's our athletic director, has brought together a leadership team of leaders across our teams and our clubs. And I think about the work that he's doing to continue to expand that program and try to build in some character development and work. That's one example of trying to bring folks together. But certainly I'll let Heidi speak to this idea of an awareness campaign. It really can't be me walking around the CAF trying to encourage. It's bigger than that. So I'll just let you speak a little bit to it.
I mean, we're in the process of building this out. But basically working with existing student groups to do things like kindness campaigns, trainings, students teaching students how to be cautious and mindful and empathetic of their peers. So I think that would probably be our initial approach or our initial entry, and a part of that, going back to that whole awareness campaign. What is equity? What is kindness? What is belonging? Everybody has an identity or multiple identities, and at different times, your identities can be impacted by marginalization, which is the thing that kind of pulls us all together.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Dave?
Thank you very much. Just one question for me. Then with the development of the discipline matrix and one of the main recommendations of the equity audit, could you just briefly touch upon how that development is also going to converge with the development of the multi-tiered systems of support that we've been talking about these past couple of weeks?
I can speak to that. So if you look at the matrix, what it does is it starts to tier behavior. So at the root and like the foundation of what a multi-tiered system of support is students are demonstrating, whether it's academic, SEL, behavior, students are demonstrating some capacity of what's expected in some way. It could be a learning standard. It could be a behavioral expectation. And we set tier one as, hey, this is what this is like the community agreement of what we expect for everyone. So I'll frame it with regard to discipline because that was your question. It's saying now we have these rules and expectations that we expect every student to follow, and we teach the skills that we want them to have so that they can be successful. And there are times where it's not a label because you can float in and out of any tier. I think I mentioned this a few meetings ago, but ultimately you could be in a situation where you now, if the expectation is set universally for everyone and you violate that rule or an expectation with regard to discipline, now you floated into needing another tier of support or accountability, or both supportive accountability on how we manage that. And depending on the infraction, you could find yourself really in a more offensive thing. So it could be running in a hallway, could be a very basic kind of first level warning, what's going on, but you could have said something very offensive and you could have directed an inappropriate comment at someone, and that might carry a different, you could have been in a fight, it could have been something on the continuum of behavior. And I think what we mean by tiers, and as it relates to the framework, is like if you are found to have bullied, it talks about if it's your first offense or if you've had multiple infractions, and discipline's progressive and interventions are progressive as well. So basically there's a continuum of how we expect kids how we would respond to student behavior with regard to your question around discipline matrix.
If I could add, I think also what we can do too is analyze the data. So we're tracking our discipline, our behavior, and our incidents, as well as tracking the behaviors that we're seeing. And if we're seeing that there's a trend going with a particular student, we can then come up with a response of more an intervention, and whether that be like a tier 1 intervention of behavioral, social, emotional, or a tier 2 intervention to prevent that behavior from happening again, or maybe an education, and we can tailor the response piece to it in an action plan. So that would be like the restorative piece of it.
Thank you.
Elise?
That was a great question, Dave. I don't have any specific questions about this because I feel like it was based on a whole lot of information, and it's going in a direction that's consistent with the other school improvement plans, the district improvement plan. The one thing it talks about the equity plan, right? So that's like an action item. Develop a multi-year equity action plan. So that sounds like a big job. And so that's just like one little bullet on this paper. And it's also part of this, right? So the next steps. So that's going to look different than this. I guess I'm like, yes. Not like this seems like a lot. And this seems like a lot. And then so the equity plan, is that just sort of like streamlining it to not just be this school year, but sort of beyond?
It's to the equity plan they're recommending is we received this audit. We have these findings. Mm-hmm. We've started to lay the foundation for some good work in this district for a few years now. Now take that information and go out and learn more and talk to people and administer surveys and get data on performance and start to put together a plan that prioritizes areas that we want to set goals around, mm-hmm. and start to look at that in a multi-year kind of idea. And this plan is really about what are we committing to this year, mm-hmm. to try to accomplish in this area. And also it's directly related to some of this you'll see is related to what Heidi is doing. And I thought we wanted to be transparent around the role of our DEI director, mm-hmm. but also in context to this plan involves everyone. And you heard our principals talk about how they'll support this work with students. So we thought we needed to give something that's going to basically be clear about what our intentions are for this year. And at the end of this year, we hope that we've set the foundation for a multi-year strategy that helps us start to continue to build out some of the ideas and recommendations, and we will have our own findings. I think that we'll be able to communicate out to everyone and set goals around if we feel they're appropriate.
Gotcha. So the equity plan, the equity action plan will exist to inform future district improvement plans and school improvement plans?
Yes.
Right. Okay. I'm like, it's just a lot of important documents. So if there's a way to streamline that,
and I'm all about synergy. That's my second favorite word to systems. So systems is number one, but synergy is my second favorite word. So yeah. I would say when we can do that and be clear. So if someone reading it can't understand it, it's really not helpful. So that's another thing.
Definitely. And I do think the transparency is important. And this year, have we sort of like pulled that? Remember Dave Callahan, when we were talking about how the district improvement plan had like we heard about the first 4, but then we were going to hear about the 5th till today. And that was like, seemed a little disjointed, but really the rationale behind it was because it took how many hours? We've been here a really long time. So it's like, it would have taken way too many hours and it would have taken away from the middle schools or away from the elementary schools or high school or ECDC, and that wouldn't have been fair to them. So
we're too early in the work, and
Yeah.
we need to incorporate those goals that are specific to each level next year into the plans. I think that was feedback, but that is the goal. But we don't know what those are yet until we dig deeper and go through a year of kind of engaging in that.
And that's the right answer, right? Is we don't know yet, and we're still learning and listening, and
Right.
we're along for the journey with you.
Megan?
Sorry, I'm just laughing at something. Yeah, thanks for the presentation, and I don't have any questions.
I have a question. In the previous presentation, you had mentioned support needed for gifted students. And here in the DEI plan in 5B, it reads enhanced learning opportunities.
Mhm.
So maybe could you be more specific on how we are planning on providing more support for gifted students?
I actually will tell you, one thing I'll mention is we piloted with Josh and I met with Rhode Island College, and I think we talked about the early college enrollment. We're piloting a course right now, just as an example for the high school. We also had the opportunity to continue that conversation more locally with Dean, but it's an exploratory conversation. So I don't want people walking away thinking that that's a done deal, but certainly there was interest to kind of see where we could kind of move in that direction. Is that for gifted and talented? It's for students who are ready. That's what those programs are for, who are ready to embark on that and try to look to earn some college credit during high school, as an example. When we think about MTSS, and I'd be happy to kick it to some of my colleagues, but this whole idea of tiered support, if students are demonstrating mastery in a specific skill or a specific area, I know that our teachers work really hard to look for ways in which they can continue to engage them and deepen the learning. I've seen it with my own child who is a student in this system. And when things are not everything, but certain things that seem to, he seems to demonstrate, he can dive a little deeper, and the teachers have been really responsive in those areas. There are other areas where we're swinging into tier 2 and tier 3 when it comes to learning. And I think that's okay. And I think it means that we're kind of moving along. I'll kick it to Dr.
Yeah,
Rogers.
so thank you. I would also just say through the curriculum revision process, we're very mindful of the resources that we're bringing into the district and that we're putting in front of students. So, a few examples I can just think of off the bat would be us bringing ST Math into the elementary school this year, which is a self-paced for the students. So students are advancing at different points in that program as a supplemental tool to our tier 1 primary resource. It's not the end all be all, but that's one way. I would draw attention to both our math curriculum that we use at the elementary middle level and also the science curriculum that we newly brought into the middle level. This idea of inviting everybody to the classroom discussion. And then by inviting everybody to that classroom discussion, I can give you some specific examples of how this happens, but you can really elevate student voice in a way that we call them in the math realm, we call them low threshold, high ceiling tasks, where you're really just inviting everybody in so everybody sees themselves honored in the science classroom, in the math classroom, in the English, whatever classroom they're in. But then that idea of that high ceiling, which it allows students and teachers to take students to higher levels. So I would say those are some ways that we're thinking about the curriculum materials that we bring in to the classroom. And then we'll be thinking through that equity lens as we embark in our literacy work. And that will bring forward to this committee at some point later in the year as well.
I don't have a question, maybe just a comment. Just personally, I think it's unfortunate that somehow creating the space for children to feel welcomed and seen and loved has become politicized. The words equity and inclusion became fighting words among those who are unwilling to accept that the world is changing. It's always changing. Teaching history, real history, is vital. That book showing both mirrors and windows for everyone is critical for all of our learners. There's no magical curriculum, as we found out, or strategy that is going to create the change that the education system needs right now. It's going to require all of us to come together and get really honest about what's working and what's not, and how we can do better as a district. So just thank you all very much for all of your time at 10 o'clock at night on Tuesday and all of your work on this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's it. You're ready, Mr. Jakir. We'll move on to discussion action items.
So we have two discussion action items for you tonight. The first is review of it's a second read of our policy. We reviewed this at the previous meeting. Just get situated. And it's the alcohol, tobacco, and drug use policy by students. We noticed some edits that we made. It's a second read, so I think you're all familiar with it. I recommend adoption of policy JICH, alcohol, tobacco, and drug use by students as detailed.
Okay, is there a motion to adopt policy JICH, alcohol, tobacco, and drug use as detailed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion, questions? Camille, Dave, Dave? Okay, all right, seeing none, vote will come on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, B.
The diversity, equity, inclusion plan we just brought before you and answered the questions. So I recommend approval of the 22-23 diversity, equity, inclusion plan as discussed.
Is there a motion to approve the 2022-2023 diversity, equity, and inclusion plan as discussed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion, questions down. All right, so seeing none, vote will come on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Discussion only items. Mr. Jakir, you have the October 1st enrollment numbers.
We do. So the enrollment data for Franklin Public Schools be provided to you as we customarily do every year. The total enrollment for Franklin Public Schools is presented as compared to the enrollment forecast presented by the demographer Jeremy McKibben in the winter of 2020. And overall, the Franklin Public Schools enrollment approximates that which was forecasted back in 2020. It's noteworthy. Some of our elementaries have higher projected enrollments and some are lower. This is likely due to effects in the housing market. The demographic information for the district also presented in the 5 years. There were percentages of students receiving free and reduced lunches increased again this year by 2%. The value from 2020, 21, and 22 may be slightly lower. However, because lunch is provided at no cost to students as a result of state funding, we have less people who applied because of so I would expect that those might be slightly lower. This may result in less applications. We've also seen an increase in our English language learners from 82 to 93 in the 2022-23 school year. And the student enrollment by race and ethnicity is also listed for this committee's review. And we continue to see an increase in racial and ethnic diversity in our district. You can see those charts that list that out. So I think it was published in the packet publicly. Lastly, charts display commonly attended school attendance options for students, Franklin resident children. And we also display the trends over the last 5 years and point out the increase in students at the elementary level attending Benjamin Franklin Charter School increased in the 2019-20 expectedly, as this was the year of the school's initial expansion. And since then, the numbers have now decreased back to pre-expansion values. There's an expected increase in the middle school students attending Benjamin Franklin Charter in 2021 as a result of the expansion to the grades in 6th grades, and these numbers have also settled back to pre-expansion values. And homeschool numbers increased as a result of the pandemic, was 65, and while lower in 2022 at 60. They continue to decrease in 22-23 to 46, which gets us closer to normal, which has typically been around 30. And high school students attending public schools other than Franklin, we've seen an increase of 8.3% in private or parochial school.
We'll go through the motions. Camille? No questions, comments? Dave Callahan?
So one thing, I think this, I'm sure, just kind of speculation. But as we were just talking about in terms of the support for the gifted students, I can't help but think, are some of the numbers that are going to some of these charter schools because of a lack of, gifted support. And so I would love to, just to see the continued expansion of that. We have great programs that we offer. And I would love just to continue to see more of those great programs supporting the top, along with every other student that we have. That's all. Thank you.
Cal?
So continue to be impressed that the closeness of the McCabe number and what we're at. I know that we're higher overall in the elementary space. And I see that there's some sharper dips than I expected, like Parmenter and I believe Oak were the two, but like everybody else has seen some increases, and one's going to probably shifted due to housing sales and movement and whatnot. But the one that really is jumping out at me is the ECDC number. I mean, we're at 148 where we projected at 111. And I know when I went there last year, space was extremely tight. But I think that's something we need to keep an eye on, and what can we do to help them, because they were busting at the gills last year.
They are at, I would say they're at max capacity. And it's part of a larger discussion with regard. I know we're doing an analysis for redistricting, but they are at their max. And I think if programming expanded, they could fill additional classrooms if the opportunity was there. And certainly that's part of a larger discussion. I think the timing of a redistricting analysis and these numbers that we're seeing is a good time. And that's once again an example of why we need to really look at this and look at how we're utilizing space across our town. So it's a good point. And yes,
it's on our minds.
Yeah. I just want to make sure folks are aware and keep that in mind, especially where these are our youngest students and their transition will go to the other schools and will impact them as well down the road. So cool. Thank you.
No, thank you.
I also wonder about those ECDC numbers. So I remember McKibben, he projected 111 for like a bunch of years, a flat. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. But the way he answered it was basically like, we don't know what we're going to get. This is how much they could have at that time. And so I'm just going to sort of bring that forward. I remember, I think it was just 111 across the board.
It was. And I think, to give the benefit of the doubt, I mean, we didn't know at the time.
It was pre-COVID. And the amount of students with disabilities that we're identifying now, and we're not sure if it's a COVID blip. It might not be, which is unfortunate to say. So I think that was he's probably going more by birth rate, because that is a data point that you can control, where you can't control identifying students predicting how many students with disabilities will be identified. Right, absolutely. Or students that don't necessarily have disabilities but have extreme needs that haven't been seen before because they've been home the first 3 years of their life, which are really important to be out socializing, music group or whatnot. And that's happening across everywhere, every district.
Absolutely.
It's just the integrated preschool programs are just busting at the gills. And I think some of it might be because parents that might have ordinarily sent their kiddo to like a private preschool might be like, oh, they might need a little support. So sometimes they just send them to the district. They're like, oh, there's people there. If something comes up, they'll be able to figure it out. You know what I mean? And so sometimes they feel like there's that security blanket of being in the public school. So I wonder if there's more enrollment that way. Is
also, early intervention. I think through COVID, early intervention probably wasn't as robust as it was in the past, and is going to be now. Our littlest babies don't do Zoom. Don't do Zoom. I was trying to think of pronounce that grammatically correct. It wasn't coming out right, but yes, they don't do Zoom.
what other question? I had another question. Just about the October 1st numbers. And so October 1st numbers are like an important thing as far as moving forward. So it's not just about the number, you're not just trying to fill airtime. This is, these numbers are important going forward. Yeah. So as far as, I guess, Mary, I'm not getting too deep into it, but this is not my realm. So as many times as I can be beat over the head with it, it helps. As far as these numbers go forth to
project out our Chapter 70 Foundation enrollment and our foundation budget for FY24. Sorry, October of this year is going to project next year's foundation enrollment by category. So our special education students are going to have an allocation. Our K through 12 students, our pre-K students, they'll all have an allocation. The enrollment will determine how much the state will decide is an amount to provide an adequate education for the students in Franklin. And from there, they will put it through their formula, determine how much we can contribute as a town towards education and how much the state will backfill in Chapter 70 money.
Got it. And so as far as the state is concerned, these are our numbers. Even if in April we had 40 families move in with lots of kids or, move out or something. So these are our numbers for FY24 as far as the state's concerned. Okay.
That's correct. And we do have students who return from other
of course
places.
Yeah.
On an ongoing basis.
Megan?
No questions.
I have a question. All I hear when I dial into other meetings, such as like FinCom or Town Council, is their numbers are declining. Oh my God, what is going on? How can we address it? It's exactly how it sounds in my head when I replay it. Can we address this? I mean, did we all of a sudden lose 2,000 students? Like, why do other folks seem to want to harp on a fake crisis of declining enrollment?
My response to the question is, even though we've seen enrollment decrease and decline, I think it ebbs and flows through the life cycle of a community. There is a reality to birth rate. I think that's hitting everyone. The needs of our kids. So we do make enrollment-based reductions based on the number of kids we have. I wish it was a math problem like a factory that's building tires that has specific amount that they produce and then can ship out, but that's not the business we're in. We're in with humans. And as I mentioned earlier in my report around the needs of kids and the supports that we need to provide them, there's an expectation in this town that we provide a very high level of education, and there should be. And it's something that's a sense of pride. It's why I know I want to work here and I want my kids to be in the system. But with the same, in the same regard, that means we also have a responsibility to make sure we're providing the supports. And, I ran into a teacher last week in one of our elementary schools, and the comment was basically like, I would love nothing more than to just teach my content area and the subject area, but there are so many other pieces about these little humans that come in that we have to work with. And it's not the state mandates, but it's just a need to make sure kids are able to access their learning, and that requires support. Sometimes it requires intervention. Sometimes it requires tutoring. Sometimes it requires additional staff that aren't necessarily the classroom teacher to help build out a system and a structure. So it's not necessarily an easy thing to solve. And as we've heard before, I'm thinking back, Dr. Hearn's in my head right now around schools have become the hub of a community. And ultimately that's how we build our supports. And we are transparent with our budget and our numbers and how we develop it, and we'll continue to do so. And I recognize that question is out there, it sounds like, and what we'll do is we'll do our best to paint the picture and tell the story and the narrative, and maybe having the people who we're talking about when we say this I think we all have a picture of a classroom teacher in our mind. And maybe when we went to school, that's what we remember. And maybe it would be worth us putting some people who do the other work. We have students who are learning English as their second language. And how are we supporting them? That takes an adult to partner with an academic teacher to make sure that there are language goals in addition to the learning goals. So that would be my long answer. Probably could give a longer one, but that would be.
No, I think that's important.
But, I understand, and I understand that we have to communicate. It's our job to educate so that when people ask that question, they may not have the answers to that, and they may want them. And I think we owe it to the community to provide that kind of information. So
I think that's important that, schools are a hub where we're dealing with mental health issues, food insecurities, student support services. I think just about my family, my grandparents had 7 kids, and then my parents had 3, and I have 1, and my siblings are like, we're never having kids because they're the worst. And, but when my grandparents had kids, their school experience is completely different than my son's. Mm-hmm. So just because we went from 7 kids to 1 kid doesn't mean we need less staff in schools.
And I think to reiterate, we provide social services at this point. We are after school care, before school care, food, health, mental health, and physical health. So we are providing it all because service providers are lacking in our communities, mental health providers. And so yes, the needs are greater. It's not just about the numbers, it's about the story.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on. Information matters. Superintendent evaluation, Elise.
We will be meeting in early November to review the superintendent's goals before he presents them to the full committee on November 22nd.
Okay, I'm so excited.
Yeah.
All right. Budget, David, you?
Budget's on that.
No joint budget subcommittee scheduled?
I believe it's in the works, but
Is it?
Not as yet.
Okay. All right. I'm just wondering. Policy, Dave Callahan.
Got next meeting, November 9th.
Okay. Community relations. Our next meeting is November 1st. Some MASC liaison news. So next week we have our MASC joint conference. Wednesday, November 2nd through Saturday, November 5th. I'll be in Hyannis, not working my job that pays me. I'll be down in the Cape.
You'll be promoting all of our resolution changes.
Yeah, I'll be doing some school committee work. I'm looking forward to attending the delegate assembly and several of the panels. They have a ridiculous amount of panels. Lucas and I were talking about it before the meeting. Their theme this year is promoting equity, diversion, and inclusion, constructing the narrative to define the message. So I'm looking forward to bringing back some information to you guys at the next meeting. Space needs and facilities, Al.
Yep. So the contract has been fully executed with FGO. So that was after our last meeting. They've requested a plethora of data just to begin their data analysis. Ms. Goodman has sent that off to FGO so that they can start doing their work. We've also put out the redistricting advisory interest form that went out last Tuesday or Wednesday, I believe, with a deadline of the 28th, which is this coming Friday, to express their interest. Happy to say that we've gotten a good amount of people, both from the families and also the educators. So great cross section, but we do have more time, as I said, till 28th. So if folks are still interested, feel free to find Mr. Jaguar's letter and express your interest. We will be letting folks know at the beginning of this month or beginning of November, where we will then have let them know that our first meeting is on November 15th, where we'll pull the advisory district together, committee together, and just really talk through goals, expectations, and really how the process is going to go. So looking forward to that, and I think looking forward to the group that we'll have as well. So great people from what I've seen so far.
Joint PCC?
Joint PCC, yep. We had met on the 17th, talked through a plethora of things, back to school night, in-person events such as like Pumpkin Squirrel, Spirit Wear fundraisers. So the PCs are really doing a lot to fund the school for enrichment activities. So if folks aren't aware, all their activities help raise funds of some sort or bring some enrichment to the students above and beyond what the district does. So a lot of great efforts just to help build some community, get folks back into a rhythm now that we're post-COVID and we can do a lot more in-person events. So great things. One thing that recently happened was that Ladybug 5K, which was hosted off at JFK. So for those runners, they were great event. And where we hadn't done that for a few years now. So it's good to get that back. But then it was also great to see the Kennedy families come together and also people that don't go to Kennedy come there as well, just to really support and help raise funds to go back to the students. And we had amazing high school students that were able to be there to help support in terms of being, running the courses to make sure that nobody was left behind, helping coordinate the little kid fun runs. So really, really great event and looking forward to another one. Beautiful day weather-wise. I think kids were wearing shorts and t-shirts and it was, November or October. So great thing there. Just once again, can't speak highly enough about the PCCs doing really great work. And I think our next meeting's on November 7th.
Okay. Can I ask a question about the JPC? We have plenty of time. I know in the past, speaking of equity, we've sort of floated the idea about the PCCs pooling their money and then divvying it out somehow rather than like Kennedy's pocket, Jefferson's pocket, because it's not always equitable. And so I guess I just want to throw that out there. And maybe if there's redistricting on the horizon, are things going to get a little bit complicated as far as that goes? I'm just throwing it out there. I don't necessarily
I think that's something that we'll have to factor in terms of how that gets allocated. And then hopefully there'll be a line item to be mindful of. One thing though that I do know, beyond just the JPCC meetings, the PCs are gathering together so that they are meeting in between our meetings, our monthly meetings, so that they can be aligned with what's being done.
Cool.
They can share
Okay.
best practices.
So that's huge progress because that didn't used to happen.
Exactly. And then
That's
also
awesome.
with the PCC chairs are usually like a 2-3 year commitment. This is a great way to have continuity so that if one school has a turnover, they at least have resources from other schools to be able to say, hey, what are you doing? And not necessarily starting from scratch.
Mhm.
So I think that will just help build things as we progress.
Definitely. No, that's great to have that in place. Good system.
School Wellness Advisory.
SWAC, we don't have any updates since our last meeting, and our next meeting is November 1st.
Okay, CPAC.
CPAC hosted a trunk at the Franklin Public Library trunk or treat this past Saturday, and apparently it was very, very busy and a huge success. They partnered with a new candy store in Milford, which is called Sweet Intentions, and they support and employ individuals with intellectual disabilities. So it was a nice little teamwork situation to collaborate and partner. And remember that book club meeting is coming up November 16th in person at Escape into Fiction and on Zoom. So there, you can grab your copy of Temple Grandin's book, Thinking in Pictures now, and check out their Facebook page for more information.
Thank you. Right. Substance abuse task.
I just want to say, the trunk or treat, it was spectacular. I really loved that there was a pamphlet that kind of came out talking about the candy shop. That was fantastic. The candy went over well with the kiddos too. But the pamphlet was great. Just being able to
Glad
talk
you're
about
happy
that.
with the candy. You got your treat of the pamphlet. I'm glad. It was good. It was informative, and we would love to support businesses like that. And so how do we know about them besides your trunk or treat?
Absolutely.
Yes, it was very helpful. Thanks for the feedback. I really appreciate you taking the time to share all your insight.
Substance abuse task force. Ms.
Okay,
Morano?
yes, absolutely. Our next meeting is November 15th. November 15th. All right.
DEI committee.
Our meeting is.
Our first meeting is
coming
next
week.
Our meeting is next week, November 2nd. I think it's
Second or third.
Wednesday. Is that the 2nd?
Third. I'm looking at
November 3rd. Thank you. Yes, so our meeting will be November 3rd.
Okay.
Focus will be to look at the keep deep game planning for our next steps.
All right.
And we can repeat that on the 19th is the opportunity.
Yes.
Yeah. Do we have any information about where, when, or how? Or?
No, we wanted to get just the date out to let people know we're intentional about it, and now we'll put out some more information.
Okay. All right. Consent agenda, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Okay, I recommend approval of the minutes from the October 11th, 2022 school committee meeting as detailed. I recommend approval of the budget transfers as detailed. I recommend acceptance of a check for $675 from the JFK PCC for field trips as detailed. I recommend approval of the 2022-23 student activity accounts as detailed. I recommend approval of the request of Mary McMurray to take the JFK 4th and 5th grade music students to the Veterans Auditorium on May 26, 2023 for a concert as detailed. And I recommend acceptance of free checks totaling $4,424.94 from the Parmenter PCC as follows. $3,236.54 for supplemental supplies, $638.40 for field trips, and $550 for field trips. I recommend acceptance of a check for $1,405 from the music parents for in-house enrichment for the music department as detailed.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as detailed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion, question?
Yeah.
Vote will come on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Moving along, are there citizens' comments? Are there any citizens in the audience, in person or online, who would like to make a comment on an item not on tonight's agenda and falls within the committee's purview? We'll go in person first. Okay. If you want.
I'm sorry, question.
If you could just, sorry. I just have to read a statement really quick. All right. In the spirit of open communication, the committee will hold a public participation segment about matters not related to an agenda item within the school committee's purview, such as budget, performance of the superintendent, and policies. Comments are limited to 3 minutes and must be addressed to the committee. Citizens' comment segments are not debates or Q&A sessions. It is intended to offer citizens an opportunity to express their opinions on issues of school committee business. The committee will listen to but not respond to any comment made. If you could state your name, address, and please keep within the 3 minutes. Thank you.
All right, these are more questions, okay, so you can't answer these. My name is Artemios from Raymond Street. I just wanted to ask if I can have a copy of that DEI presentation. Is that available for me to take?
Can I answer? Or?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yes, we'll make that. It is public. We'll post the presentation along with the audit for people to see.
Another question, I'm sorry. If DEI has an audit, and to me, an audit has a checklist and a score. So what are the penalties if that checklist, all those boxes aren't checked and there's a low score? Is that a fair assessment that an audit is a checklist and a score? And PCG is the one who's auditing, right?
PCG conducted the external audit. Yes, they did.
So going forward, these audits are going to happen yearly?
That's not the intention of the plan of the day. I don't know if I should be engaging, but I feel like
I'm not. I don't think.
It's a precarious situation.
So I think that we can address it at a future meeting. So if you just wanted to kind of go through when we can address it at the next one.
Okay, so if you guys can expand on that in another meeting about the audit.
Yep.
What it entails, how long if it's going to happen. And also, where's the DEI agenda coming from? You stated, Camille, a law in the Constitution. Which we had this before DEI, what you stated, what you read. Why do we need DEI now to focus on this? Didn't we have this before, the belonging to? everybody equal, equitable, even before DEI? Like, why is this a new thing now? If you can expand on that later too, that'd be great. I think that's all I have for now. I appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you. If you could just state your name and address.
Yes, my name is Mark Minichelli. I'm at 31 Longfellow Drive in Franklin. This subject is important to me. It brought me back to the school committee meeting. I haven't been to one here in Franklin in 45 years. So I'm fully supportive. I just wanted to lend my words of support to all of you, to thank the school committee for the time that you spend in general, as well as the school administration members that are here tonight. When I was in high school in the mid-70s here, I don't think anybody knew what diversity and inclusion even meant. Neither students nor administration in those years. It was not until I was in corporate settings over the last 20 to 25 years, there was a lot of emphasis placed on diversity and inclusion. And during those sessions, I learned how important it was to the success of business. And there are a number of studies that show that businesses that are more diverse happen to be more successful and more profitable. And it makes me think back to a message that I would encourage this team of committee and administration to think about, that I think the benefits go beyond the underrepresented students that diversity and inclusion will directly impact, and probably has an impact on all of the students in the classroom, in the setting, during discussions. I think back to perhaps during my high school years, could I have learned more if some of the students in the classroom who were holding back for one reason or another, because perhaps they didn't feel comfortable expressing that opinion, could I have learned more? I'm certain that I could have, and I would have had an enhanced education experience. And I think I don't hear that message in what I saw tonight, and perhaps it would help more of the community accept what you're doing if you can relate the benefits to all of the students in the school by helping some of the students become more comfortable. So I thank you for your time on this and many other topics, and I won't wait another 45 years to retire.
Thank you. Go to Zoom. Is anyone on Zoom? If you wanted to raise your hand, if you wanted to go ahead. Megan Benson, if you could state your name and address, and with the 3 minutes.
Yes, in Benson, 19 Winthrop Drive. So my first question is kind of both, I guess, kind of along the lines of the first speaker. But first of all, I'm wondering if there is a way to release the methodology and the sample size around this audit. I do appreciate Elise Stokes having kind of questioned it a bit. And then, I agree with you, Elise, kind of the disappointment with this audit. We spent obviously a ton of money, for this third party to kind of conduct this. But then what I find a little bit just, as a researcher professionally, I find a little bit disconcerting is the fact that this was presented tonight, but there was not much information about methodology or sample size or, what was the split between the focus group, the qualitative data versus quantitative. And I think that's really huge because we're using the results of this study to create a plan. But, if in my personal, in my job, if I went to a client and said, here's this study, and I'm going to present this to you, and you're going to use this to make decisions, the very first thing and the most important thing I have to do is kind of map out how many people answered these questions, the demographics of them, basically provide them methodology and sample size. So that part is huge. The second thing I would like to touch on is just, in the beginning of the meeting, we talked about the behavioral issues that we see in these less structured settings. And we're talking hallways, lunchroom, bathrooms, dismissal. If we are seeing major behavioral issues, I would hope that the parents of these students are being contacted and it's being addressed from that level as well. I'm not seeing necessarily how this influx of DEI curriculum and instruction would help that. If I were to guess, it's a result of the pandemic and these children not having these social interactions and not being in a school setting for as long as they were. And the fact that it's behavior issues in these structured or less structured situations versus structured kind of speaks to that. So I would like to also kind of bring that up. And again, on the, in the same tone as the first gentleman who spoke, is this an actual issue of needing this diversity, equity, inclusion, or is this an issue of focusing on the more obvious kind of basic things? So again, I just wanted to present those and hope that you would consider both of those concepts.
Thank you, Megan. I see Kyle Thompson. Kyle, if you could state your name and address. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you. Thank you, Kyle. All right, now I can't turn it off. Right. So there's no one else. All right, new business, Mr. Jagir.
Okay, so next meeting is on, I'm sorry? Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, Ruth Ann, if you could state your full name, address, and stick to 3 minutes, please.
You're muted.
Can you unmute her?
Ask her to unmute.
Or maybe she doesn't want to talk. There she is.
Hey there.
Hi. State your name, address in 3 minutes.
Sure. So Ruth Ann O'Sullivan and 175 Oak Street. I'll keep it short. I just wanted to thank the schools for their commitment, dedication to this work. The majority of us are grateful for your dedication. The lack of understudy about DEI was clear in the previous statements. I want to say that the majority of us support this work. That's the most important point. And just wanted to cool the temperature because I think this isn't a political discussion. This is a discussion about inclusivity and children feeling safe and comfortable and accepted and kids being exposed and open-minded. And I just think the entire majority of the community is really, really respecting the work that you're doing on this. So thank you for coming to town, Heidi. That is all.
Okay.
Just one more.
Elizabeth Morrison, if you could state your name and address and stick to 3 minutes. Yep, I think she put her hand down.
Oh, could have been.
Okay. All right. Mr. Jagir, new business.
Okay. Okay, so new business, our next meeting, we will, our presentation schedule will be focused on our assessments, MCAS, and getting that information out around the MCAS results. So we'll provide an update on that. You can also expect some more updates from our subcommittees and liaisons. And by November 2nd, we'll have had an opportunity to continue to engage with the company that we're working with for redistricting. And we'll provide an update with some of the information that they're sharing as we get prepared for the kickoff. And I think that's
All right, so finally, we will be adjourning to executive session and will not be returning to open meeting. So pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, for the purpose of discussing strategy as it relates to collective bargaining with the cafeteria, van drivers, secretaries, and ESP units, as an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee as declared by the chair. Is there a motion to adjourn into executive discussion as discussed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Roll call vote will come on the motion. Camille?
Yes.
Dave Callahan?
Yes.
Al Charles?
yes.
Dave McNeil?
Yes.
Elise Stokes?
Yes.
Megan Whitmore?
Yes.
Me Spencer, yes. All right. We will not be returning. So we will see everyone again in November.